Good evening, I'm Lester Holt, and welcome to night 2 of the first Democratic debate in the 2020 race for president.
Good evening, I'm Savannah Guthrie. Last night we heard from 10 candidates, and now 10 more take the stage.
And again tonight we'll be joined to the questioning by our colleagues, José Diaz-Balart, Chuck Todd, and Rachel Maddow.
The candidates are in position, so let's get started.
Tonight, round 2, Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, former Vice President Joe Biden, South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, California Senator Kamala Harris, former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, California Congressman Eric Swalwell, author MARIANNE Williamson, and former tech executive Andrew Yang. From NBC News, Decision 2020, the Democratic Candidates Debate. Live from the Adrian Arzt Performing Arts Center in Miami, Florida.
Spirited audience here tonight in the Arts Center and across America tonight. We continue this spirited debate about the future of the country, how to tackle our most pressing problems, and getting to the heart of the biggest issues in this Democratic primary.
Tonight we're going to talk about health care, immigration. We're also going to dive into the economy, jobs, climate change as well.
And some quick rules of the road before we begin, and they may sound familiar. 20 candidates qualified for this first debate. As we said, we heard from 10 last night, and we'll hear from 10 more tonight. The breakdown for each night was selected at random. The candidates will have 60 seconds to answer, 30 seconds for any follow-ups.
And because of the large field of candidates, not every person is going to be able to weigh in on every topic. But over the course of the next 2 hours, we will hear from everyone.
And we love our audience, but we'd like to ask them to keep their reactions to a minimum, and we're not going to hold back in making sure the candidates stick to time. So with that business taken care of, let's get to it. And we're going to start today with Senator Sanders. Good evening to you. You've called for big new government benefits like universal health care and free college. In a recent interview, you said you suspected that Americans would be, quote, delighted to pay more taxes for things like that. My question to you is, will taxes go up for the middle class in a Sanders administration? And if so, how do you sell that to voters?
Well, you're quite right. We have a new vision for America. And at a time when we have 3 people in this country owning more wealth than the bottom half of America, while 500,000 people are sleeping out on the streets today, we think it is time for change, real change. And by that I mean that health care, in my view, is a human right. And we have got to pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. Under that system, by the way, vast majority of the people in this country will be paying significantly less for health care than they are right now. I believe that education is the future for this country. And that is why I believe that we must make public colleges and universities tuition free and eliminate student debt. And we do that by placing a tax on Wall Street. Every proposal that I have brought forth is fully paid for.
Senator Sanders, I'll give you 10 seconds just to answer the very direct question. Will you raise taxes for the middle class in a Sanders administration?
People who have health care under Medicare for all will have no premiums, no deductibles, no co-payments, no out-of-pocket expenses. Yes, they will pay more in taxes, but less in health care for what they get.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Bennett, we're going to get to everybody, I promise, but let me just, Senator Biden, promise everybody's going to get in here, promise. Vice President Biden, Senator Sanders, as you know, has been calling for a revolution. Recently, in remarks to a group of wealthy donors, as you were speaking about the problem of income inequality in this country, you said, we shouldn't, quote, demonize the rich. You said, nobody has to be punished. No one's standard of living would change. Nothing would fundamentally change. What did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is, look, Donald Trump thinks Wall Street built America. Ordinary middle-class Americans build America. My dad used to have an expression. He said, Joe, a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's being able to look your kid in the eye and say everything's going to be okay. Too many people who are in the middle class and poor have had the bottom fall out under this proposal. What I'm saying is that we've got to be straightforward. We have to make sure we understand that to return dignity to the middle class, they have to have insurance that is covered and they can afford it. They have to make sure that we're in a situation where there's continuing education and they're able to pay for it. And they have to make sure that they're able to breathe air that is clean and they have water that they can drink. Look, Donald Trump has put us in a horrible situation. We do have enormous income inequality. And the one thing I agree on is we can make massive cuts in the $1.6 trillion in tax loopholes out there. And I would be going about eliminating Donald Trump's tax cuts for the wealthy.
Vice President Biden, thank you. Senator Harris. There's a lot of talk in this primary about new government benefits, such as student loan cancellation, free college, health care, and more. Do you think that Democrats have a responsibility to explain how they will pay for every proposal they make along those lines?
Well, let me tell you something. I hear that question, but where was that question when the Republicans and Donald Trump passed a tax bill that benefits the top 1% and the biggest corporations in this country, contributing at least $1 trillion to the debt of America, which middle-class families will pay for one way or another? Working families need support and need to be lifted up. And frankly, this economy is not working for working people. For too long, the rules have been written in the favor of the people who have the most and not in favor of the people who work the most, which is why I am proposing that we change the tax code. So for every family that is making less than $100,000 a year, they will receive a tax credit that they can collect up to $500 a month, which will make all the difference between those families being able to get through the end of the month with dignity and with support or not. And on day one, I will repeal that tax bill that benefits the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America.
Senator Harris, thank you. Governor Hickenlooper, let me get you in on this. You've warned that Democrats will lose in 2020 if they embrace socialism, as you put it. You were booed at the California Democratic Convention when you said that. Only one candidate on this stage, Senator Sanders, identifies himself as a democratic socialist. What are the policies or positions of your opponents that you think are veering towards socialism?
Well, I think that the bottom line is if we don't clearly define that we are not socialists, the Republicans are going to come at us every way they can and call us socialists. And if you look at the Green New Deal, which I admire the sense of urgency and how important it is to do climate change, I'm a scientist, but we can't promise every American a government job. If you want to get universal health care coverage, I believe that health care is a right and not a privilege. But you can't expect to eliminate private insurance for 180 million people, many of whom don't want to give it up. In Colorado, we brought businesses and nonprofits together. We got near universal health care coverage. We were the first state in America to bring the environmental community and the oil and gas industry to aggressively address methane emissions. And we were also the first place to expand reproductive rights on a scale basis, and we reduced teen pregnancy by 54%. We've done the big progressive things that people said couldn't be done. I've done what pretty much everyone else up here is still talking about doing.
Governor, thank you. Senator Sanders, I'll give you a chance to weigh in here. What is your response to those who say nominating a socialist would re-elect Donald Trump?
Well, I think the responses at the polls, last poll I saw had us 10 points ahead of Donald Trump, because the American people understand that Trump is a phony, that Trump is a pathological liar and a racist, and that he lied to the American people during his campaign. He said he was going to stand up for working families. Well, President Trump, you're not standing up for working families when you try to throw 32 million people off the health care that they have, and that 83% of your tax benefits go to the top 1%. That's how we beat Trump. We expose him for the fraud that he is.
Senator Gillibrand, 30 seconds.
I disagree with both their perspectives. The debate we're having in our party right now is confusing because the truth is there's a big difference between capitalism on the one hand and greed on the other. And so all the things that we're trying to change is when companies care more about profits when they do about people. So if you're talking about ending gun violence, it's the greed of the NRA and the gun manufacturers that make any progress impossible. It's the greed of the insurance companies and the drug companies when we want to try to get health care as a right and not a privilege. So there need not be disagreement in the party because, in truth, we want healthy capitalism.
Thank you.
We don't want corrupted capitalism.
Thank you. I want to be fair to all the candidates. Thank you. Senator Bennett, you have said, quote, it's possible to write policy proposals that have no basis in reality. You might as well call them candy. Were you referring to any candidate or proposal in particular when you said that?
Was that directed to me?
Yes, that was your quote.
That sounded like me. Thank you.
It was you.
I appreciate it. Well, look, first of all, I agree completely with Bernie about what the fundamental challenge we're facing as a country is. 40 years of no economic growth for 90% of the American people. 160,000 families in the top 0.1% have the same wealth as the bottom 90%, and we've got the worst income inequality that we've had in 100 years. Where I disagree is on his solution on Medicare for all. You know, I have proposed getting to universal health care, which we need to do. It is a right. Health care is a right. We need to get to universal health care. I believe the way to do that is by finishing the work we started with Obamacare and creating a public option that every family and every person in America can make a choice for their family about whether they want a public option, which for them would be like having Medicare for all, or whether they want to keep their private insurance. I believe we will get there much more quickly if we do that.
But wait,
Bernie, if I could just finish, Bernie mentioned that the taxes that we would have to pay, because of those taxes, Vermont rejected Medicare for all.
Senator,
and we should have
In Bernie's bill,
Senator, please. We are going to talk about health care at length, Senator, but for the moment, my colleague Jose wants to continue the question.
I wrote the part in Senator Sanders' bill. I wrote the part in Senator Sanders' bill that is the transition, which merges what the two senators said. Because the truth is, if you have a buy-in over a 4 or 5 year period, you move us to single payer more quickly.
Senator, we will get to this. We will get to this.
I understand.
Before we do, I want to say hello and good evening, buenas noches to Mayor Buttigieg.
Buenas noches, gracias de invitarnos.
Gusto en verlo, caballero. Many of your colleagues on stage support free college. You do not. Why not?
Sure. So college affordability is personal for us. Chasten and I have 6-figure student debt. I believe in reducing student debt. It's logical to me that if you can refinance your house, you ought to be able to refinance your student debt. I also believe in free college for low and middle income students for whom cost could be a barrier. I just don't believe it makes sense to ask working class families to subsidize even the children of billionaires. I think the children of the wealthiest Americans can pay at least a little bit of tuition. And while I want tuition costs to go down, I don't think we can buy down every last penny for them. Now, there's something else that doesn't get talked about in the college affordability debate. Yes, it needs to be more affordable in this country to go to college. It also needs to be more affordable in this country to not go to college. You should be able to live well, afford rent, be generous to your church and Little League, whether you went to college or not. That's one of many reasons we need to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour.
Jose, I've got $100,000 in student loan debt myself.
Let me get to you.
We can't count on the people who've been in government for the last 30 years who were around when this problem was created to be the ones to solve it. It's going to be the next generation, the 40 million of us who can't start a family, can't take a good idea and start a business, and can't buy our first home. This is the generation that's going to be able to solve student loan debt. This generation is ready to lead.
Mr. Yang, your signature policy is to give every adult in the United States $1,000 a month, no questions asked.
That's right.
I think that's like $3.2 trillion a year. How would you do that?
Sorry?
How would you do that?
Oh, so it's difficult to do if you have companies like Amazon, trillion-dollar tech companies paying literally zero in taxes while they're closing 30% of our stores. Now, we need to put the American people in position to benefit from all these innovations in other parts of the economy. And if we had a value-added tax at even half the European level, it would generate over $800 billion in new revenue, which combined with the money in our hands, it would be the trickle-up economy from our people, families, and communities up. We would spend the money and it would circulate through our regional economies and neighborhoods, creating millions of jobs, making our families stronger and healthier. We'd save money on things like incarceration, homelessness services, emergency room health care, and just the value gains from having a stronger, healthier, mentally healthier population would increase GDP by $700 billion. This is the move that we have to make, particularly as technology is now automating away millions of American jobs. It's why Donald Trump is our president today, that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And we're about to do the same thing to millions of retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, truck driving jobs, and on through the economy.
Mr. Yang, if I get you understand a little bit better, so you're saying $1,000 a month for everyone over 18, but a value-added tax, so you can spend that $1,000 on value-added tax?
Well, the value-added tax would end up, you'd still be increasing the buying power of the bottom 94% of Americans. You have to spend a lot of money for a mild value-added tax to eat up $12,000 a year per individual. So for the average family with 2 or 3 adults, it'd be $24,000 to $36,000 a year. Okay,
Congressman Swalwell, I want to talk a little bit about what Mr. Yang is talking about, and you just actually mentioned it. Many Americans are worried that things like self-driving cars, robots, drones, artificial intelligence will cost them their jobs. What would you do to help people get the skills they need to adapt to this new world?
We must always be a country where technology creates more jobs than it displaces. And I've seen the anxiety across America where the manufacturing floors go from 1,000 to 100 to 1. So we have to modernize our schools, value the teachers who prepare our kids, wipe the student debt from any teacher that goes into a community that needs it, invest in America's communities, especially where the best exports are people who move away to get skills. But Jose, I was 6 years old when a presidential candidate came to the California Democratic Convention and said, it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans. That candidate was then Senator Joe Biden. Joe Biden was right when he said it was time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans 32 years ago. He's still right today. If we're going to solve the issues of automation, pass the torch. If we're going to solve the issues of climate chaos, pass the torch. If we're going to solve the issue of student loan debt, pass the torch. If we're going to end gun violence for families who are fearful of sending their kids to school, pass the torch.
Vice President, would you like to sing a torch
song?
I
would. I'm still holding on to that torch. I want to make it clear to you, look, the fact of the matter is what we have to do is make sure that everybody is prepared better to go on to educate for an education. The fact is that's why I propose us focusing on schools that are in distress. That's why I think we should triple the amount of money we spend for Title I schools. That's why I think we should have universal pre-K. That's why I think every single person who graduates from high school, 65 out of 100 now, need something beyond high school. And we should provide for them to be able to get that education. That's why there should be free community college, cutting in half the cost of college. That's why we should be in a position where we do not have anyone have to pay back a student debt when they get out. They are making less than $25,000 a year. Their debt is frozen, no interest payment until they get beyond that. We can't put people in a position where they aren't able to go on and move on. And so, folks, there's a lot we can do, but we have to make continuing education available for everyone so that everyone can compete in the 21st century. We're not doing that now.
Senator Sanders.
As the youngest guy on the stage, I feel like I probably ought to contribute to the generational conversation.
As part of Joe's generation,
I'm all for
part of Joe's generation, let me respond.
Before we move on
the issue, if I may say, is not generational.
Please.
The
Senator
issue
Sanders.
is not generational. The issue is who has the guts to take on Wall Street, to take on the fossil fuel industry, to take on the big money interests who have unbelievable influence over the economic and political life of this country.
These issues haven't gotten better.
Senator Harris, I'm so sorry. We will let all of you speak. Senator Harris. Senator Harris. Please, we will let you all speak. Senator Harris.
We can't afford to wait for evolution on these issues.
Hey, guys, you know what? America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table. Yes? Part of the issue that is at play in America today, and we've all been traveling around the country, I certainly have, I'm meeting people who are working 2 and 3 jobs. You know, this president walks around talking about and flouting his great economy, right? My great economy, my great economy. You ask him, well, how are you measuring this greatness of this economy of yours? And he talks about the stock market. Well, that's fine if you own stocks. So many families in America do not. You ask them, how are you measuring the greatness of this economy of yours? And they point to the jobless numbers and the unemployment numbers. Well, yeah, people in America are working. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. So when we talk about jobs, let's be really clear. In our America, no one should have to work more than 1 job to have a roof over their head and food on the table.
Thank you very much, Senator.
We've all expressed an interest in talking about health care. So let's talk about health care. And this is going to be a show of hands question. We asked a question about health care last night that spurred a lot of discussion, as you know. We're going to do it again now. Many people watching at home have health insurance through their employer. Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Yeah. All right. Christian Gillibrand, Senator Gillibrand.
Yeah, so no, it's my turn.
Go ahead.
So this is a very important issue. So the plan that Senator Sanders and I and others support, Medicare for All, is how you get to single payer. But it has a buy-in transition period, which is really important. In 2005, when I ran for Congress in a 2-to-1 Republican district, I actually ran on Medicare for All, and I won that 2-to-1 Republican district twice. And the way I formulated it was simple. Anyone who doesn't have access to insurance they like, they could buy in at a percentage of income they could afford. So that's what we put into the transition period for our Medicare for All plan. I believe we need to get to universal health care as a right and not a privilege to single payer. The quickest way you get there is you create competition with the insurers. God bless the insurers if they want to compete, they can certainly try. But they've never put people over their profits, and I doubt they ever will. So what will happen is people will choose Medicare, you will transition, we will get to Medicare for All, and then your step to single payer is so short. I would make it an earned benefit, just like Social Security, so that you buy in your whole life, it is always there for you, and it's permanent and it's universal.
Senator, your time is up. I want to put that same question to Mayor Buttigieg.
Yeah, we've taught, look, everybody who says Medicare for All, every person in politics who allows that phrase to escape their lips, has a responsibility to explain how you're actually supposed to get from here to there. Now, here's how I would do it. It's very similar. I would call it Medicare for all who want it. You take something like Medicare, a flavor of that, you make it available on the exchanges, people can buy in, and then if people like us are right, that will be not only a more inclusive plan, but a more efficient plan than any of the corporate answers out there, then it will be a very natural glide path to the single-payer environment. But let's remember, even in countries that have outright socialized medicine, like England, even there's still a private sector. That's fine. It's just that for our primary care, we can't be relying on the tender mercies of the corporate system. This one's very personal for me. I started out this year dealing with the terminal illness of my father. I make decisions for a living. And nothing could have prepared me for the kind of decisions our family faced. But the thing we had going for us was that we never had to make those decisions based on whether it was going to bankrupt our family because of Medicare. And I want every family to have that same freedom to do what is medically right, not live in financial fear.
Your time is complete. Vice President Biden, I want to put the question to you. You were one of the architects of Obamacare. So where do we go from here?
Look, this is very personal to me. When my wife and daughter were killed in an automobile accident, my 2 boys were really very badly injured. I couldn't imagine what it'd be like had I not had adequate health care available immediately. And then when my son came home from Iraq after a year, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he was given months to live. I can't fathom what would have happened if, in fact, they said, by the way, the last 6 months of your life, you're on your own. We're cutting off. You've used up your time. The fact of the matter is that the quickest, fastest way to do it is build on Obamacare, to build on what we did. And secondly, to make sure that everyone does have an option. Everyone, whether they have private insurance, employer insurance, or no insurance, they, in fact, could buy in the exchange to a Medicare-like plan. And the way to do that, we can do it quickly. Look, urgency matters. There's people right now facing what I faced and what we faced without any of the help I had. We must move now. I'm against any Democrat who opposes to take down Obamacare and any Republican who wants to get rid of Obamacare.
Let me turn to Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders, you basically want to scrap the private health insurance system as we know it and replace it with a government-run plan. None of the states that have tried something like that, California, Vermont, New York has struggled with it, have been successful. If politicians can't make it work in those states, how would you implement it on a national level? How does this work?
Listen, I find it hard to believe that every other major country on earth, including my neighbor 50 miles north of me, Canada, somehow has figured out a way to provide health care to every man, woman, and child, and in most cases, they're spending 50% per capita what we are spending. Let's be clear. Let us be very clear. The function of health care today, from the insurance and drug company perspective, is not to provide quality care to all in a cost-effective way. The function of the healthcare system today is to make billions in profits for the insurance companies. And last year, if you could believe it, while we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and I will lower prescription drug prices in half in this country, top 10 companies made $69 billion in profit. They will spend hundreds of millions of dollars lying to the American people, telling us why we cannot have a Medicare for all single-payer program.
I just have to follow up there. How do you implement it on a national level? How do you implement it on a national level, given the fact it's not succeeded and other states have tried?
I will tell you how we'll do it. We'll do it the way real change has always taken place, whether it was the labor movement, the civil rights movement, or the women's movement. We will have Medicare for all, when tens of millions of people are prepared to stand up and tell the insurance companies and the drug companies that their day is gone, that health care is a human right, not something to make huge profits off.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Williamson. Ms. Williamson, this is a question for you. Excuse me. I'm addressing the question, Ms. Williamson. We've been talking a lot about access to health insurance, but for many Americans, their most pressing concern is the high cost of health care. How would you lower the cost of prescription drugs?
Well, first of all, the government should never have made the deal with the big pharma that they couldn't negotiate. That was just part of the regular corruption by which multinational corporations have their way with us. You know, I want to say that while I agree with, I'm with Senator Bennett and others, but I agree with almost everything here. I'll tell you one thing. It's really nice if we got all these plans, but if you think we're going to beat Donald Trump by just having all these plans, you got another thing coming. Because he didn't win by saying you had a plan. He won by simply saying, make America great again. We've got to get deeper than just these superficial fixes, as important as they are. Even if we're just talking about the superficial fixes, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a health care system in the United States. We have a sickness care system in the United States. We just wait till somebody gets sick, and then we talk about who's going to pay for the treatment and how they're going to be treated. What we need to talk about is why so many Americans have unnecessary chronic illnesses, so many more compared to other countries. And that gets back into not just the big pharma, not just health insurance companies. It has to do with chemical policies. It has to do with environmental policies. It has to do with food policies. It has to do with drug policies.
Thank you.
It has to do with environmental
Senator
policies.
Bennett, a question for you. You want to keep the system that we have in place with Obamacare and build on it. You mentioned that a moment ago. Is that enough to get us to universal coverage?
I believe that will get us the quickest way there. And I thought the Vice President was very moving about this, and Mayor Pete as well. I had prostate cancer recently, as you may know, and it's why I was a little late getting in the race. The same week, my kid had her appendectomy out, and I feel very strongly that families ought to be able to have this choice. I think that's what the American people want. I believe it will get us there quickly. There are millions of people in America that do not have health insurance today because they can't, they're too wealthy. They make too much money to be on Medicaid. They can't afford health insurance. When Senator Sanders says that Canada is single payer, there are 35 million people in Canada. There are 330 million people in the United States, easily the number of people on a public option. It could easily be 35 million. And for them, it would be Medicare for all, as Mayor Buttigieg says. But for others that want to keep it, they should be able to keep it. And I think that will be the fastest way to get where we need to go. Also, I will say, Bernie is a very honest person. He has said over and over again, unlike others that have supported this legislation, over and over again, that this will make illegal all insurance except cosmetic, except insurance for, I guess that's for plastic surgery. Everything else is banned under the Medicare for All proposal that he has put
I'd let you go a little longer there, but obviously, Senator Sanders, you got a response. Senator Sanders, he's a response.
Just very briefly. You know, Mike, Medicare is the most popular health insurance program in the country. People don't like their private insurance companies. They like their doctors and hospitals. Under our plan, people go to any doctor they want, any hospital they want. We will substantially lower the cost of health care in this country because we'll stop the greed of the insurance companies.
On this issue, we have to think about how this affects real people. And the reality of how this affects real people is captured in a story that many of us heard, and I will paraphrase. There is, any night in America, a parent who's seeing that their child has a temperature that is out of control, calls 911, what should I do? And they say, take the child to the emergency room. And so they get in their car and they drive, and they're sitting in the parking lot outside of the emergency room, looking at those sliding glass doors while they have the hand on the forehead of their child, knowing that if they walk through those sliding glass doors, even though they have insurance, they will be out a $5,000 deductible when they walk through those doors. That's what insurance companies are doing in America today.
We're going to continue this discussion. I wanted to put it in a myth about candidates, please.
I'm one of those parents. I was just in the emergency room, and I'm telling
Congressman, thank you.
We fight health insurance companies every single week. We stand in line and pay expensive prescription drugs. We have to have a health care guarantee. If you're sick, you're seen, and in America, you never go broke because of it.
Okay. A lot of you have been talking tonight about these government health care plans that you've proposed in one form or another. This is a show of hands question, and hold them up for a moment so people can see. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants. Okay. Let me start with you, Mayor Buttigieg. Why? Mayor Buttigieg, why?
Because our country is healthier when everybody is healthier. And remember, we're talking about something people are given a chance to buy into. In the same way that there are undocumented immigrants in my community who pay. They pay sales taxes. They pay property taxes directly or indirectly. This is not about a handout. This is an insurance program. And we do ourselves no favors by having 11 million undocumented people in our country be unable to access health care. But of course, the real problem is we shouldn't have 11 million undocumented people with no pathway to citizenship. It makes no sense. And the American people agree on what to do. This is the crazy thing. If leadership consists of forming a consensus around a divisive issue, this White House has divided us around a consensus issue. The American people want a pathway to citizenship. They want protections for dreamers. We need to clean up the lawful immigration system, like how my father immigrated to this country. And as part of a compromise, we can do whatever common sense measures are needed at the border. But Washington can't deliver on something the American people want. What does that tell you about the system we're living in? It tells you it needs profound structural reform.
Vice President Biden, I believe you said that your health care plan would not cover undocumented immigrants. Could you explain your position?
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon.
I believe at the show of hands, you did not raise your hand. Did you raise your hand?
No, I did.
Okay, sorry. So you said they would be covered under your plan, which is different than Obamacare.
Yes, but here's the thing.
Can you explain that change?
Yes. You cannot let, as the mayor said, you cannot let people who are sick, no matter where they come from, no matter what their status, go uncovered. You can't do that. It's just going to be taken care of, period. You have to. It's a humane thing to do. But here's the deal. The deal is that he's right about three things. Number one, they, in fact, contribute to the well-being of the country, but they also, for example, they've increased the lifespan of Social Security because they have a job, they're paying a Social Security tax. That's what they're doing. It's increased the lifespan. They would do the same thing in terms of reducing the overall cost of health care by them being able to be treated and not wait till they're in extremis. The other thing is, folks, look, we can deal with these insurance companies. We can deal with the insurance companies by, number one, putting insurance executives in jail for their misleading advertising, what they're doing on opioids, what they're doing paying doctors to prescribe. We could be doing this by making sure everyone who is on Medicare, that the government should be able to negotiate the price for whatever the drug costs are. We can do this by making sure that we're in a position that we, in fact, allow people. Time's up.
I just want to address that point.
Actually, if you can hold off a minute, we need to take a short break here. We got a lot more we need to talk to all of you about, so stick with us. We're just getting started. We'll be back with more from Miami right after this. Welcome back from Miami. Jose is going to lead off the questioning in this round.
Thank you very much. Senator Harris, last month, more than 130,000 migrants were apprehended at the southern border. Many of them are being detained, including small children, in private detention centers in Florida and throughout our country. Most of the candidates on this stage say the conditions at these facilities are abhorrent. On January 20th, 2021, if you are president, what specifically would you do with the thousands of people who try to reach the United States every day and want a better life through asylum?
Immediately on January 20th of 2021, I will, first of all, we cannot forget our DACA recipients, and so I'm going to start there. I will immediately, by executive action, reinstate DACA status and DACA protection to those young people. I will further extend protection for deferral of deportation for their parents and for veterans, who we have so many who are undocumented and have served our country and fought for our democracy. I will also immediately put in place a meaningful process for reviewing the cases for asylum. I will release children from cages. I will get rid of the private detention centers. And I will ensure that this microphone that the President of the United States holds in her hand is used in a way that is about reflecting the values of our country, and not about locking children up, separating them from their parents. And I have to just say that we have to think about this issue in terms of real people. A mother who pays a coyote to transport her child through their country of origin, through the entire country of Mexico, facing unknown peril, to come here. Why would that mother do that? I will tell you. Because she has decided for that child to remain where they are is worse. But what does Donald Trump do? He says, go back to where you came from. That is not reflective of our America and our values, and it's got to end.
Governor Hickenlooper, day one, if you are, day one at the White House, how do you respond?
Deal with these children?
Let me get to you in just a second.
I'm sorry.
Governor, day one, thousands of men, women, and children cross the border asking for asylum, for a better life. What do you do? Day one, hour one.
Well, certainly the images we've seen this week just compound the emotional impact that the world is judging us by. If you'd ever told me any time in my life that this country would sanction federal agents to take children from the arms of their parents, put them in cages, actually put them up for adoption, in Colorado we call that kidnapping, I would have told you, it was unbelievable. And the first thing we have to do is recognize the humanitarian crisis on the border for what it is. We make sure that there are the sufficient facilities in place so that women and children are not separated from their families, the children are with their families. We have to make sure that ICE is completely reformed and they begin looking at their job in a humanitarian way where they're addressing the whole needs of the people that they are engaged with along the border. And we have to make sure ultimately that we provide not just shelter, but food, clothing, and access to medical care.
Ms. Williamson.
Yes, what Donald Trump has done to these children, and it's not just in Colorado, Governor, you're right, it is kidnapping, and it's extremely important for us to realize that. If you forcibly take a child from their parents' arms, you are kidnapping them. And if you take a lot of children and you put them in a detainment center, thus inflicting chronic trauma upon them, that's called child abuse. This is collective child abuse. And when this is crime, both of those things are a crime. And if your government does it, that doesn't make it less of a crime. These are state-sponsored crimes.
Congressman.
And what President Trump has done is not only attack these children, not only demonize these immigrants, he is attacking a basic principle of America's moral core. We open our hearts to the stranger. This is extremely important. And it's also important for all of us to remember, and I have great respect for everyone who is on this stage, but we're going to talk about what to do about health care. Well, where have you been, guys? Because if it's not just a matter of a plan, and I haven't heard anybody on this stage who has talked about American foreign policy in Latin America and how we might have, in the last few decades, contributed to something being more.
Senator Gillibrand, what would you do as president with a reality?
Well, one of the worst things about President Trump that he's done to this country is he's torn apart the moral fabric of who we are. When he started separating children at the border from their parents, the fact that 7 children have died in his custody, the fact that dozens of children have been separated from their parents and they have no plan to reunite them. So I would do a few things. First, I would fight for comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship. Second, I would reform how we treat asylum seekers at the border. I would have a community-based treatment center where you're doing it within the communities, where asylum seekers are given lawyers, where there's real immigration judges, not employees of the Attorney General, but appointed for life, and have a community-based system. I would fund border security, but the worst thing President Trump has done is he's diverted the funds away from cross-border terrorism, cross-border human trafficking, drug trafficking, and gun trafficking, and he's given that money to the for-profit prisons. I would not be spending money in for-profit prisons to lock up children and asylum seekers.
We had a very spirited debate on this stage last night on the topic of decriminalization of the border. If you'd be so kind, raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross the border without documentation. Can we keep the hands up so we could see them?
And let's remember, that's not just a theoretical exercise. That criminalization, that is the basis for family separation. You do away with that, it's no longer possible. Of course, it wouldn't be possible anyway in my presidency because it is dead wrong. We got to talk about one other thing, because the Republican Party likes to cloak itself in the language of religion. Now, our party doesn't talk about that as much, largely for a very good reason, which was we are committed to the separation of church and state, and we stand for people of any religion and people of no religion. But we should call out hypocrisy when we see it. And for a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say that it is okay, to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents, that God would condone putting children in cages, has lost all claim to ever use religious language again.
Vice President, Mr. Vice President, I don't know if you raised your hand or were just asking to speak. Would you decriminalize crossing the border without documents?
The first thing I would do is unite families. I'd surge immediately billions of dollars worth of help to the region immediately. Look, we talk about foreign policy. I'm the guy that got a bipartisan agreement at the very end of the campaign, at the very end of our term, to spend $740 million to deal with the problem. And that was to go to the root cause of why people are leaving in the first place. It was working. We saw, as you know, a net decrease in the number of children who were coming. The crisis was abated. And along came this president. He said he immediately discontinued that. We all talk about these things. I did it. I did it. 740 million. Now look, second thing we have to do. The law now requires the reuniting of those families. We would reunite those families, period. And if not, we put those children in a circumstance where they were safe until we could find their parents. And lastly, the idea that he's in court with his Justice Department saying children in cages do not need a bed, do not need a blanket, do not need a toothbrush. That is outrageous.
Vice President, the Obama-Biden administration The Obama-Biden administration deported more than 3 million Americans. My question to you is, if an individual is living in the United States of America without documents and that is his only offense, should that person be deported?
No.
Depending if they committed a major crime. They should be deported. And the president was left in his. President Obama, I think, did a heck of a job. To compare him to what this guy's doing is absolutely, I find, close to immoral. But the fact is that, look, we should not be locking people up. We should be making sure we change the circumstance, as we did, why they would leave in the first place. And those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe until they can be heard.
A 15-second, if you could, if you wish to answer. Should someone who is here without documents, and that is his only offense, should that person be deported?
That person should not be the focus of deportation. We should fundamentally change the way we deal with things.
Senator,
I want to suggest that I agree with a lot of what Kamala just said. And that is, on day one, we take out our executive order pen and we rescind every damn thing on this issue that Trump has done. Number two, picking up on the point that Joe made, we got to look at the root causes. And you have a situation where Honduras, among other things, is a failing state, massive corruption. You got gangs who are telling families that if a 10-year-old does not join that gang, that family is going to be killed. What we have got to do on day one is invite the presidents and the leadership of Central America and Mexico together. This is a hemispheric problem that we have got to address.
Congressman Swalwell, what do you do?
Day one?
No. If someone is here without documents and that is their only offense, is that person to be deported?
No. That person can be a part of this great American experience. That person can contribute. My congressional district is one of the most diverse in America, and we see the benefits when people contribute and they become a part of the community and they're not in the shadow economy. Day one for me, families are reunited. This president, though, for immigrants, there's nothing he will not do to separate a family, cage a child, or erase their existence by weaponizing the census. And there is nothing that we cannot do in the courts and that I will not do as president to reverse that and to make sure that families always belong together.
Senator Harris.
Well, thank you. I will say, no, absolutely not. They should not be deported. And I actually, this was one of the very few issues with which I disagreed with the administration, with whom I otherwise had a great relationship and a great deal of respect. But on the secure communities issue, I was Attorney General of California. I led the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice in a state of 40 million people. And on this issue, I disagreed with my president because the policy was to allow deportation of people who, by ICE's own definition, were non-criminals. So as Attorney General and the Chief Law Officer of the state of California, I issued a directive to the sheriffs of my state that they did not have to comply with detainers and instead should make decisions based on the best interest of public safety of their community. Because what I saw, and I was tracking it every day, I was tracking it and saw that parents, people who had not committed a crime, even by ICE's own definition, were being deported. But I have to add a point here. The problem with this kind of policy, and I know it as a prosecutor, Senator, I want a rape victim to be able to run in the middle of the street and wave down a police officer and report the crime against her. I want anybody who has been the victim of any real crime to be able to do that and not be afraid that if they do that, they will be deported because the abuser will tell them it is they who is the criminal. It is wrong. It is wrong.
We're going to turn to the issue of trade now, if we can. Last night, we asked the candidates on this stage to name the greatest geopolitical threat facing the U.S. 4 of them mention China. U.S. businesses say China steals our intellectual property, and party leaders on both sides accuse China of manipulating their currency to keep the cost of goods artificially low. I'll ask this to Senator Bennett to start off with. How would you stand up to China?
I think that, first of all, the biggest threat to our national security right now is Russia, not China. And second, on China, we've got competition because of what they've done with our elections. In China, I think the president's been right to push back on China, but has done it in completely the wrong way. We should mobilize the entire rest of the world who all have a shared interest in pushing back on China's mercantilist trade policies, and I think we can do that. I'd like to answer the other question before this as well.
You have the time?
When I see these kids at the border, I see my mom because I know she sees herself, because she was separated from her parents for years during the Holocaust in Poland. And for Donald Trump to be doing what he's doing to children and their families at the borders, I say this as somebody who wrote the immigration bill in 2013 that created a pathway to citizenship for 11 million people in this country, that had the most progressive DREAM Act that's ever been conceived, much less passed. It got 68 votes in the Senate, that had $46 billion of border security in it, that was sophisticated 21st century border security, not a medieval wall. And the president has turned the border of the United States into a symbol of nativist hostility that the whole world is looking at, when what we should be represented by is the Statue of Liberty, which has brought my parents to this country to begin with. We need to make a change.
Mr. Yang, let me bring you in on this, on the issue of China. You've expressed a lot of concerns about technology and taking jobs. Are you worried about China? And if so, how would you stand up against it?
Well, I just want to agree that I think Russia is our greatest geopolitical threat, because they've been hacking our democracy successfully, and they've been laughing their asses off about it for the last couple of years. So we should focus on that before we start worrying about other threats. Now, China, they do pirate our intellectual property. It's a massive problem. But the tariffs and the trade war are just punishing businesses and producers and workers on both sides. I met with a farmer in Iowa who said he spent 6 years building up a buying relationship in China that's now disappeared and gone forever. And the beneficiaries have not been American workers or people in China. It's been Southeast Asia and other producers that have then stepped into the void. So we need to crack down on Chinese malfeasance in the trade relationship, but the tariffs and the trade war are the wrong way to go.
All right, Mayor Buttigieg, how would you stand up against China?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we've got to recognize that the China challenge really is a serious one. This is not something to dismiss or wave away. And if you look at what China is doing, they're using technology for the perfection of dictatorship. But their fundamental economic model isn't going to change because of some tariffs. I live in the industrial Midwest. Folks who aren't in the shadow of a factory are somewhere near a soy field where I live. And manufacturers, and especially soy farmers, are hurting. Tariffs are taxes. And Americans are going to pay on average $800 more a year because of these tariffs. Meanwhile, China is investing so that they could soon be able to run circles around us in artificial intelligence. And this president is fixated on the China relationship as if all that mattered was the export balance on dishwashers. We've got a much bigger issue on our hands, but at a moment when their authoritarian model is being held up as an alternative to ours because ours looks so chaotic compared to theirs right now because of our internal divisions. The biggest thing we've got to do is invest in our own domestic competitiveness. If we disinvest in our own infrastructure, education, we are never going to be able to compete. And if we really want to be an alternative, a democratic alternative, we actually have to demonstrate that we care about democratic values at home and around the world.
We've got a good debate so far. We're going to take a quick break here, candidates. When we come back, the questioning continues with our colleagues. Chuck Todd, Rachel Maddow will be here. Much more with our candidates straight ahead.
Welcome back to the Democratic presidential debate from the Arch Center in Miami.
As we continue the questioning, we want to bring in more members of our team.
So let's turn it over to Chuck Todd and Rachel Maddow.
Well, Rachel, I had a dream that we've done this before.
No. This is definitely
didn't happen.
the first time.
Definitely first time. Thank you, Lester, Savannah, and Jose. Let's quickly recap the rules one more time. 20 candidates qualified for this first debate. We've heard from 10 of them from last night. We're hearing from 10 more tonight. Breakdown for each night was selected at random. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer direct questions, 30 seconds for follow-ups, if necessary.
Because of this large field of candidates, not every person will be able to comment on everything, but the less audience reaction there is, the more time they will all get. Over the course of the next hour, we will hear from all of these candidates, but we are going to begin this hour with Mayor Buttigieg. In the last 5 years, civil rights activists in our country have led a national debate over race and the criminal justice system. Your community of South Bend, Indiana, has recently been in uproar over an officer-involved shooting. The police force in South Bend is now 6% black in a city that is 26% black. Why has that not improved over your 2 terms as mayor?
Because I couldn't get it done. My community is in anguish right now because of an officer-involved shooting, a black man, Eric Logan, killed by a white officer. And I'm not allowed to take sides until the investigation comes back. The officer said he was attacked with a knife, but he didn't have his body camera on. It's a mess, and we're hurting. And I could walk you through all of the things that we have done as a community, all of the steps that we took from bias training to de-escalation, but it didn't save the life of Eric Logan. And when I look into his mother's eyes, I have to face the fact that nothing that I say will bring him back. This is an issue that is facing our community and so many communities around the country. And until we move policing out from the shadow of systemic racism, whatever this particular incident teaches us, we will be left with the bigger problem of the fact that there's a wall of mistrust put up one racist act at a time, not just from what's happened in the past, but from what's happening around the country in the present. It threatens the well-being of every community. And I am determined to bring about a day when a white person driving a vehicle and a black person driving a vehicle, when they see a police officer approaching, feels the exact same thing, a feeling not of fear, but of safety. I am determined to bring that day about.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I could ask one question, just because I think...
Governor, I'll give you 30 seconds.
I think that the question they're asking in South Bend, I think in cities across the country, is why has it taken so long? We had a shooting when I first became mayor 10 years before Ferguson. And the community came together and we created an Office of the Independent Monitor, a Civilian Oversight Commission. We diversified the police force in 2 years. We actually did de-escalation training. I think the real question that America should be asking is why 5 years after Ferguson, every city doesn't have this level of police accountability.
Governor Hickenlooper, thank you.
I've got to respond to that. Look, we've taken so many steps toward police accountability that the FOP just denounced me for too much accountability. We're obviously not there yet. And I accept responsibility for that because I'm in charge.
Policy, you should fire the chief.
So under Indiana law, this will be investigated, and there will be accountability for the officer involved.
But you're the mayor, you should fire the chief if that's the policy and someone died.
All of these issues are extremely important, but there are specifics, there are symptoms, and the underlying cause has to do with deep, deep, deep realms of racial injustice, both in our criminal justice system and in our economic system. And the Democratic Party should be on the side of reparations for slavery for this very reason. I do not believe that the average American is a racist, but the average American is woefully undereducated about the history of race in the United States.
Ms. Williamson, thank you very much.
Vice President Biden, we're going to get to you. Hang on, we're going to get to
stage. I would like to speak on the issue of race.
Senator Harris, if I could preface this, we will give you 30 seconds since we're going to come back to you on this again in just a moment. Go for 30 seconds.
Okay. So on the issue of race, I couldn't agree more that this is an issue that is still not being talked about truthfully and honestly. There is not a black man I know, be he a relative, a friend, or a coworker, who has not been the subject of some form of profiling or discrimination. Growing up, my sister and I had to deal with the neighbor who told us her parents couldn't play with us because we were black. And I will say also that in this campaign, we've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of 2 United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly. As Attorney General of California, I was very proud to put in place a requirement that all my special agents would wear body cameras and keep those cameras on.
Senator Harris, thank you. Vice President Biden, you have been invoked. We are going to give you a chance to respond. Vice President Biden.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. That is not true. Number one. Number two, if we want to have this campaign litigated on who supports civil rights and whether I did or not, I'm happy to do that. I was a public defender. I didn't become a prosecutor. I came out and I left a good law firm to become a public defender when in fact my city was in flames because of the assassination of Dr. King. Number one. Now, number two, as the Vice President of the United States, I work with a man who, in fact, we worked very hard to see to it we dealt with these issues in a major, major way. The fact is that in terms of busing, the busing, you would have been able to go to school the same exact way because it was a local decision made by your city council. That's fine. That's one of the things I argued for, that we should be breaking down these lines. But so the bottom line here is, look, everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local
decision. So
decision.
that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
I have supported the ERA from the very beginning when I ran
Vice President Biden, 30 seconds, because I want to bring other people into this.
I supported the ERA from the very beginning. I'm the guy that extended the Voting Rights Act for 25 years. We got to the place where we got 98 out of 98 votes in the United States Senate doing it. I've also argued very strongly that we, in fact, deal with the notion of denying people access to the ballot box. I agree that everybody, once they, in fact, they should. Anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Vice President.
All of these things have
Senator Sanders, Senator Sanders, I want to go to you on this. You said on the day you launched your campaign that voters should focus on what people stand for, not a candidate's race or age or sexual orientation. Many Democrats are very excited by the diversity of this field on this stage and on last night's stage, and the perspective that diversity brings to this contest and to these issues. Are you telling Democratic voters that diversity shouldn't matter when they make this decision?
No, absolutely not. Unlike the Republican Party, we encourage diversity. We believe in diversity. That's what America is about. But in addition to diversity, in terms of having more women, more people from the LGBT community, we also have to do something else. And that is, we have to ask ourselves a simple question. And that, how come today the worker in the middle of our economy is making no more money than he or she made 45 years ago, and that in the last 30 years, the top 1% has seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth? We need a party that is diverse, but we need a party that has the guts to stand up to the powerful special interests who have so much power over the economic and political life of this country.
Senator Gillibrand, I want to give you 30 seconds on this.
Well, first of all, where Bernie left off, We've heard a lot of good ideas on this stage tonight and a lot of plans, but the truth is, until you go to the root of the corruption, the money in politics, the fact that Washington is run by the special interests, you are never going to solve any of these problems. I have the most comprehensive approach that experts agree is the most transformative plan to actually take on political corruption, to get money out of politics through publicly funded elections, to have clean elections. If we do that and get money out of politics, we can guarantee health care as a right, not a privilege. We can deal with institutional racism. We can take on income inequality, and we can take on the corporate corruption that runs Washington.
The first constitutional amendment to do that was introduced by me when I was a young senator.
Thank you, Vice President. We want to shift topics here. Senator Bennett, the next question is for you. On the issue of partisan gridlock, President Obama promised in 2012 that after his reelection, Republicans would want to work with Democrats. Fever would break. That did not happen. Now, Vice President Biden is saying the same thing, that if he is elected in 2020, both parties will want to work together. Should voters believe that somehow if there's a Democratic president in 2021, that gridlock is going to magically disappear?
Gridlock will not magically disappear as long as Mitch McConnell is there, first. Second, that's why it is so important for us to win not just the presidency, to have somebody that can run in all 50 states, but to win the Senate as well. And that's why we have to propose policies that can be supported, like Medicare X, so that we can build a broad coalition of Americans to overcome broken Washington, D.C. I agree with what Senator Gillibrand was saying. I share a lot of her views. We need to end gerrymandering in Washington. We need to end political gerrymandering in Washington. The court today said they couldn't do anything about it. We need to overturn Citizens United. The court was the one that gave us Citizens United. And the attack on voting rights in Shelby versus Holder is something we need to deal with. All of those things has happened since Vice President Biden was in the Senate. And we face structural problems that we have to overcome with a broad coalition. It's the only way we can do it. We need to root out the corruption in Washington, expand people's right to get to the polls, and I think then we can succeed.
Vice President Biden, 30 seconds. It does sound as if you haven't seen what's been happening in the United States Senate over the last 12 years. It didn't happen. Why?
I have seen what happened. Just since we were vice president, we needed 3 votes to pass an $800 billion recovery act that kept us from going into depression. I got 3 votes changed. We needed to be able to keep the government from shutting down and going bankrupt. I got Mitch McConnell to raise taxes $600 billion by raising the top rate. And as recently as after President got elected, I was able to put together a coalition of the Cures Act that billions of dollars go into cancer research, bipartisan. But sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you just have to go out and beat them. I went into 20 states, over 60 candidates, and guess what? We beat them. We won back the Senate.
Thank you.
Chuck,
thank you,
the problem with what the Vice President...
30 seconds. Go ahead.
Sometimes you do have to beat him, but the deal that he talked about with Mitch McConnell was a complete victory for the Tea Party. It extended the Bush tax cuts permanently. The Democratic Party had been running against that for 10 years. We lost that economic argument because that deal extended almost all those Bush tax cuts permanently and put in place the mindless cuts that we still are dealing with today that are called the sequester. That was a great deal for Mitch McConnell. It was a terrible deal for America.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Bennett.
Heard from the Republicans
Go ahead, 30
that
seconds.
the reason why the Trump tax cut had to be passed is because they had to pay back their donors. You heard it. They actually said those words. So the corruption in Washington is real, and it is something that makes every one of the plans we've heard about over the last several months impossible. And I have the most comprehensive approach to do it with clean elections, publicly funded elections. So we restore the power of our democracy into the hands of the voters, not into the Koch brothers. We were talking about issues. Imagine, we're in Florida, imagine the Parkland kids having as much power in our democracy as the Koch brothers or the NRA. Imagine their voices carrying farther and wider than anyone else because their voice is needed.
Senator Gillibrand, I'm trying to get everybody in here.
As president, it's the first thing I'm going to do because nothing else is possible, whether it's education or healthcare or ending institutional racism.
Thank you very much.
Senator Sanders, I'd like to put a different question to you. Roe versus Wade has been the law of the land since 1973. Now that there is a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, several Republican-controlled states have passed laws to severely restrict or even ban abortion. One of those laws could very well make it to the Supreme Court during your presidency, if you're elected president. What is your plan if Roe is struck down in the court while you're president?
Well, my plan is somebody who believes, for a start, that a woman's right to control her own body is a constitutional right, that government and politicians should not infringe on that right. We will do everything we can to defend our Roe versus Wade. Second of all, let me make a promise here. You ask about litmus test. My litmus test is I will never nominate any justice to the Supreme Court unless that justice is 100% clear he or she will defend Roe v. Wade. Third of all, I do not believe in packing the court. We got a terrible 5-4 majority conservative court right now. But I do believe that constitutionally we have the power to rotate judges to other courts. And that brings in new blood into the Supreme Court and a majority, I hope, that will understand that a woman has the right to control her own body and that corporations cannot run the United States of America.
Hold on, I'm going to give you 10 additional seconds because the question is, what if the court has already overturned Roe and Roe is gone? All of the things you just described would be to try to preserve Roe. If Roe is gone, what could you do as president to preserve abortion rights?
Well, first of all, let me tell you this. It didn't come up here, but let's face this. Medicare for all guarantees every woman in this country the right to have an abortion if she wants it.
Thank you, Senator.
And can I just address this for a second? And I want to talk directly to America's women and to the men who love them. Women's reproductive rights are under assault by President Trump and the Republican Party. 30 states are trying to overturn Roe v. Wade right now. And it is mind-boggling to me that we are debating this on this stage in 2019 among Democrats, whether women should have access to reproductive rights. I think we have to stop playing defense and start playing offense. But let me tell you one thing about politics, because it goes to the corruption and the deal-making. When the door is closed and the negotiations are made, there are conversations about women's rights, and compromises have been made on our backs. That's how we got to Hyde. That's how the Hyde Amendment was created, a compromise by leaders of both parties. Then we have the ACA. During the ACA negotiation, I had to fight like heck with other women to make sure that contraception wasn't sold down the river or abortion services. And so what we need to know is, imagine this one question. When we beat President Trump, and Mitch McConnell walks into the Oval Office, God forbid, to do negotiations, who do you want, when that door closes, to be sitting behind that desk to fight for women's rights? I have been the fiercest advocate for women's reproductive freedom for over a decade. And I promise you, as president, when that door closes, I will guarantee women's reproductive freedom no matter what.
Thank you. We're moving to climate. We're moving to climate, guys. Senator Harris, I'm addressing you first on this. You live in a state that has been hit by drought, wildfires, flooding. Climate change is a major concern for voters in your state. It's pretty obvious. Obviously, this state as well. Last night, voters heard many of the candidates weigh in on their proposals. Explain specifically what yours is.
Well, first of all, I don't even call it climate change. It's a climate crisis. It represents an existential threat to us as a species. And the fact that we have a president of the United States who has embraced science fiction over science fact will be to our collective peril. I visited, while the embers were smoldering, the wildfires in California. I spoke with firefighters who were in the midst of fighting a fire while their own homes were burning. And on this issue, it is a critical issue that is about what we must do to confront what is immediate and before us right now. That is why I support a Green New Deal. It is why I believe on day one, and as president, will re-enter us in the Paris Agreement, because we have to take these issues seriously. And frankly, we have a president of the United States. We talked about, you asked before, what is the greatest national security threat to the United States? It's Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I agree, climate change. represents an existential threat. He denies the science. You want to talk about North Korea, real threat in terms of nuclear arsenal, but what does he do? He embraces Kim Jong-un, a dictator for the sake of a photo op. Putin, you want to talk about
Senator
Russia?
Harris, we're going to do
takes the word of the Russian president over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to a threat to our democracy and our elections.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
These are the issues that are before us, Chuck.
I hear you. Thank you, Senator Harris. Mayor Buttigieg, in your climate plan, if you're elected president in your first term, how is this going to help farmers impacted by climate change in the Midwest?
Well, the reality is we need to begin adapting right away, but we also can't skip a beat on preventing climate change from getting even worse. It's why we need aggressive and ambitious measures. It's why we need to do a carbon tax and dividend. But I would propose we do it in a way that is rebated out to the American people in a progressive fashion so that most Americans are made more than whole. This isn't theoretical for us in South Bend either. Parts of California on fire. Right here in Florida, they're talking about sea level rise. Well, in Indiana, I had to activate the Emergency Operations Center of our city twice in less than 2 years. The first time was a 1,000-year flood, and the next time was a 500-year flood. This is not just happening on the Arctic ice caps. This is happening in the middle of the country, and we've got to be dramatically more aggressive moving forward. Now, here's what very few people talk about. First of all, rural America can be part of the solution instead of being told they're part of the problem. With the right kind of soil management and other kind of investments, rural America could be a huge part of how we get this done. And secondly, we got to look to the leadership of local communities. You know, those networks of mayors and cities from around the world who have come together, not even waiting for our national governments to catch up. We should have a Pittsburgh summit where we bring them together as well as rejoining the Paris.
Thank you, Mayor Buttigieg.
I want to bring Governor Hickenlooper into this for a moment. Governor, you have said that oil and gas companies should be a part of the solution on climate change. Lots of your colleagues on stage tonight have talked about moving away from fossil fuels entirely. Can oil and gas companies be real partners in this fight?
Well, I share the sense of urgency. I'm a scientist, so I recognize that we're within 10 or 12 years of actually, suffering irreversible damage. But guaranteeing everybody a government job is not going to get us there. Socialism, and in that sense, is not the solution. We have to look at what really will make a difference. In Colorado, we're closing a couple of coal plants, replacing them with wind, solar, and batteries, and the monthly bills go down. We're building a network for electric vehicles. We are working with the oil and gas industry, and we created the first methane regulations in the country. Methane is 25 times worse than CO2. And then we've got to get to that last part. I mean, the industrial, heavy industry, we haven't seen the plans yet. If you look at the real problem, CO2, the worst polluters in CO2 is China, is the United States, and then it's concrete and it's exhalation. And beyond that, I think we've got to recognize that only by bringing people together, businesses, nonprofits, and we can't demonize every business. We've got to bring them together to be part of this thing, because ultimately, if we're not able to do that, we will be doomed to failure. We have no way of doing this without bringing everyone together.
Thank you. Vice President Biden, on the issue of how you do this, Democrats are arguing robustly among themselves about what's the best way to tackle climate change. But if we're honest, many Republicans, including the president, are still not sure if they believe it is even a serious problem. So, are there significant ways you can cut carbon emissions if you have to do it with no support from Congress?
The answer is yes. Number one, in our administration, we built the largest wind farm in the world, the largest solar energy facility in the world. We drove down the competitive price of both of those renewable sources. I would immediately insist that we, in fact, build 500,000 recharging stations throughout the United States of America, working with governors, mayors, and others, so that we can go to a full electric vehicle future by the year 2020, or by the year 2030. I would make sure that we invested $400 million in new science and technology to be the exporter, not only of the green economy, but economy that can create millions of jobs. But I would immediately join the Paris Climate Accord. I would up the ante in that accord, which it calls for, because we make up 15% of the problem. 85% of the world makes up the rest. And so we have to have someone who knows how to corral the rest of the world, bring them together, and get something done like we did in our administration.
Senator Sanders, I want to give you 30 seconds to follow up, and I'm going to hold you to 30.
Look, the old ways are no longer relevant. The scientists tell us we have 12 years before there is irreparable damage to this planet. This is a global issue. What the President of the United States should do is not deny the reality of climate change, but tell the rest of the world that instead of spending $1.5 trillion on weapons of destruction, let us get together for the common enemy, and that is to transform the world's energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. The future of the planet rests on us doing that.
Before we go, hang on.
Before we leave this topic.
Here's the solution. Pass the torch. Pass the torch to the generation that's going to feel the effects of climate change. Pass the torch to the generation that's inventive enough.
Thank you
Before we leave this topic, here's something you all want to weigh in on. Hold on a moment. Hold one moment.
Just trust us on this.
If somebody has a younger body doesn't mean you don't have old ideas.
No, we need new ideas.
John Kennedy did not say, I have a plan to get a man to the moon, and so we're going to do it, and I think we can all work together, and maybe we can get a man on the moon. And John Kennedy said, by the end of this decade, we are going to put a man on the moon. Because John Kennedy was back in the day when politics included the people, and included imagination, and included great dreams, and included great plans. And I have had a career not making the political plans, but I have had a career harnessing the inspiration and the motivation and the excitement of people, masses of people. When we know that when we say we are going to turn from a dirty economy to a clean economy, we're going to have a Green New Deal, we're going to create millions of jobs, we're going to do this within the next 12 years, because I'm not interested in just winning the next election. We are interested in our grandchildren.
All right, we're going to sneak in a break in a minute, but before we go, I'm going to go down the line here, and I'm asking you, please, for 1 or 2 words only. All right? Please.
Really?
President Obama in his first year wanted to address both healthcare and climate. And he could only get one signature issue accomplished. It was obviously healthcare. He didn't get to do climate change. You may only get one shot, and your first issue that you're going to push, you get one shot that it may be the only thing you get passed. What is that first issue for your presidency? Eric Swalwell, you're first.
For Parkland, for Orlando, for every community affected by gun violence, ending gun violence.
Senator Bennett.
Climate change and the lack of economic mobility Bernie talks about.
Senator Gillibrand.
Passing a family bill of rights that includes a national paid leave plan, universal pre-K, affordable daycare, and making sure that women and families can thrive in the workplace no matter who they are.
Oh, I like that.
That was pretty. Senator Harris.
Then. So passing a middle class and working families tax cut,
That's one.
DACA, guns.
I'm giving you credit for the first thing you said, the tax cut. I got you. Senator Sanders, first thing.
The premise that there's only 1 or 2 issues out there. This
I'm not saying
country
there's 1 or 2.
faces enormous crises.
Senator Sanders.
We need a political revolution. People have got to stand up and take on the special interest. We can transform this country.
Fine. Vice President Biden, your first issue, Mr. Vice President.
I think you're so underestimating what Barack Obama did. He's the first man to bring together the entire world, 196 nations, to commit to deal with climate change immediately. So I don't buy that. But the first thing I would do is make sure that we defeat Donald Trump. Period.
Mayor Buttigieg, your first priority, your first issue as president that you were going to block and tackle.
We've got to fix our democracy before it's too late. Get that right. Climate, immigration, taxes, and every other issue gets better.
Mr. Yang.
I would pass a $1,000 freedom dividend for every American adult starting at age 18, which would speed us up on climate change, because if you get the boot off of people's throats, they'll focus on climate change much more clearly.
Governor Hickenlooper?
I would do a collaborative approach to climate change, and I would pronounce it well before the election to make sure we don't re-elect the worst president in American history.
And Ms. Williamson
with
the last word.
My first call is to Prime Minister of New Zealand, who said that her goal is to make New Zealand the place where it's the best place in the world for a child to grow up. And I will tell her girlfriend you were so on, because the United States of America is going to be the best place in the world for a child to grow up.
We are going to have... You guys were close with the short, at least it was shorter responses.
Not at all.
All right. C-.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with these candidates right after this. Welcome back to the Democratic candidates debate in Miami. We're going to continue the questioning now with Lester in the audience. We are in a second are going to have a question from Lester in the audience, but that was just a fake out.
Let's go. We're going to go to the issue of guns and
Congressman Swalwell. Among this field of candidates, you have a unique position on gun reform. You're proposing that the government should buy back every assault weapon in America, and it should be mandatory. How do you envision that working, especially in states where gun rights are a strong flashpoint?
Keep your pistols, keep your rifles, keep your shotguns, but we can take the most dangerous weapons from the most dangerous people. We have the NRA on the ropes because of the moms, because of the Brady Group, because of Giffords, because of March for Our Lives. But I'm the only candidate on this stage calling for a ban and buyback of every single assault weapon in America. I've seen the plans of the other candidates here. They would all leave 15 million assault weapons in our communities. They wouldn't do a single thing to save a single life in Parkland. I'll approach this issue as a prosecutor. I'll approach it as the only person on this stage who has voted and passed background checks, but also as a parent of a generation who sends our children to school where we look at what they're wearing so we can remember it in case we have to identify them later. A generation who has seen thousands of black children killed in our streets, and a generation who goes to the theater and we actually look where the fire exits are. We don't have to live this way. We must be a country who loves our children more than we love our guns.
Senator Sanders, a Vermont newspaper recently released portions of an interview you gave in 2013 in which you said, quote, "My own view on guns is everything being equal, states should make those decisions."
No.
Has your thinking changed since then? Do you now think there's a federal role to play?
That's a mischaracterization of my thinking.
It's a
Look,
quote of
we
you.
have a gun crisis right now. 40,000 people a year are getting killed. In 1988, Rachel, when it wasn't popular, I ran on a platform of banning assault weapons, and in fact lost that race for Congress. I have a D- voting record from the NRA. And I believe that what we need is comprehensive gun legislation that, among other things, provides universal background. We end the gun show loophole. We end the straw man provision. And I believed in 1988, and I believe today.
Why would you
that
leave
assault
why would you
weapons,
leave 15
assault
million on the
weapons,
streets? Why would you
assault
leave-
weapons are
Senator,
weapons
you leave
are
15
from the
million on the streets,
military,
though.
and that they should not be on the streets of America.
You would leave. Your plan leaves them on the streets. You leave 15 million on the
We
streets.
banned the sale and
Will you buy 'em back?
distribution, and that's what I believe for many years.
Will you buy them back?
If people want to buy, if the government wants to do that, and people want
You're
to
going to
bring
be
it
the
back,
government.
yes.
Will you buy them back?
Yes.
Senator Harris, we're going to give you 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think your idea is a great one, Congressman Swalwell, and I will say that there are a lot of great ideas. The problem is Congress has not had the courage to act, which is why when elected President of the United States, I will give the United States Congress 100 days to pull their act together, bring all these good ideas together, and put a bill on my desk for signature. And if they do not, I will take executive action, and I will put in place the most comprehensive background check policy we've had. I will require the ATF to take the licenses of gun dealers who violate the law, and I will ban by executive order the importation of assault weapons. Because I'm going to tell you, as a prosecutor, I have seen more autopsy photographs than I care to tell you. I have hugged more mothers who are the mothers of homicide victims, and I have attended more police officer funerals. It is enough. It is enough. There have been plenty of good ideas from members of the United States Congress. There's been no action. As president, I will take action.
Mayor Buttigieg, I want to bring you in on this, sir. A lot of discussion about assault rifles that are often shorthanded as military-style weapons. You are the only person on this stage tonight with military experience as a veteran of the Afghanistan war. Will military families, does that inform your thinking on this view? Do you believe that military families or America's veterans will, at large, have a different take on this than the other Americans who we've been talking about and who Congressman Swalwell is appealing to with his buyback program?
Yeah, of course, because we trained on some of these kinds of weapons. Look, every part of my life experience informs this. Being the mayor of a city where the worst part of the job is dealing with violence, we lose as many as were lost at Parkland every 2 or 3 years in my city alone. And this is tearing communities apart. If more guns made us safer, we'd be the safest country on earth. It doesn't work that way. And common sense measures like universal background checks can't seem to get delivered by Washington, even when most Republicans, let alone most Americans, agree it's the right thing to do. And as somebody who trained on weapons of war, I can tell you that there are weapons that have absolutely no place in American cities or neighborhoods in peacetime, ever.
Vice President Biden, 30 seconds.
A real 30 seconds?
A real 30 seconds.
Okay. I'm the only person that's beaten the NRA nationally. I'm the guy that got the Brady bill passed, the background checks, number one. Number two, we increased that background check during the Obama-Biden administration. I'm also the only guy that got assault weapons banned, and the number of clips in a gun banned. And so, folks, look, and I would buy back those weapons. We already started talking about that. We tried to get it done. I think it can be done, and it should be demanded that we do it, and that's a good expenditure of money. And lastly, we should have smart guns. No gun should be able to be sold unless your biometric measure could pull that trigger. It's within our right to do that. We can do that. Our enemy is the gun manufacturers, not the NRA. The gun manufacturer.
Vice President,
but the NRA is taking orders from the gun manufacturer.
Lester Holt has our next question. Lester, take it away.
All right, Chuck. This is a question from our viewers. We put some suggestions that asked maybe they could share some. Here's one that came from Kathleen from Canby, Oregon, who writes, many fear the current administration has inflicted irrevocable harm on our governing institutions and norms, and in the process, on our reputation abroad. The question is, what do you see as important early steps in reversing the damage done? And we'll put this one to Senator Bennett.
Thank you very much. What an excellent question. First of all, we have to restore our democracy at home. The rest of the world is looking for us for leadership. We have a president who doesn't believe in the rule of law. He doesn't believe in freedom of the press. He doesn't believe in independent judiciary. He believes in the corruption that he's brought to Washington, D.C., and that is what we have to change, and that's why everybody is up here tonight, and I appreciate the fact that they're up here for that reason. Second, we've got to restore the relationships that he's destroyed with our allies, not just in Europe. He flew to the G20 last night and attacked Japan, Germany, and a third ally of ours without saying anything about North Korea or Russia. And when you've got a situation where you have a president who says something happened in the Straits of Hormuz and the whole world doesn't know whether to believe it or not, that is a huge problem when it comes to the national security of the United States of America.
This is a perfect
we
time.
Need to change that.
Thank you, Senator Bennett. It's a perfect time for me to do another one of these down the line. And this is what this question is, which is, you're likely going to have to reset a relationship between America and another country or entity if you become president perhaps because of some relationship that you just mentioned about President Trump. What is the first relationship you like to reset as president? I'm going to go down the line, and I'll start with Ms. Williamson.
Well, one of my first phone calls would be to call the European leaders and say, we're back. Because I totally understand how important it is that the United States be part of the Western Alliance.
I'm trying to get one or two words here. I hear you. Governor Hickenlooper.
You know, I talk about constant engagement, and I think the first country I would go to, and I understand they've been cheating and stealing intellectual property, would be China, because if we're going to deal with public health pandemics, if we're going to deal with all the challenges of the globe, we've got to have relationships with everyone.
Mr. Yang, we're trying to squeeze in a couple more things before we go to another break. Mr. Yang.
China, we need to cooperate with them on climate change, AI, and other issues. North Korea.
Thanks for the quickness. Mayor Buttigieg.
We have no idea which of our most important allies he will have pissed off worse between now and then. What we know is that our relationship with the entire world needs to change. And it starts by modeling American values at home.
Okay, Mr. Vice President, I'm trying to be quick.
We know NATO will fall apart if he's elected 4 more years as the single most consequential alliance in the history of the United States.
Senator Sanders.
It's not one country. I think it is rebuilding trust in the United Nations and understand that we can solve conflicts without war, but with diplomacy.
Senator Harris.
All the members of the NATO alliance.
Senator Gillibrand.
President Trump is hell-bent on starting a war with Iran. My first act will be to engage Iran to stabilize the Middle East and make sure we do not start an unwanted, never-ending war.
Senator Bennett, quickly.
Our European allies and every Latin American country that's willing to have a conversation about how to deal with the refugee crisis.
And Congressman Swalwell.
My first act in foreign policy, we're breaking up with Russia and making up with NATO.
Thank you all. Thank you all. We have one
That's a good plan.
last question for Vice President Biden tonight. You have made your decades of experience in foreign policy a pillar of your campaign. But when the time came to say yes or no on one of the most consequential foreign policy decisions of the last century, you voted for the Iraq War. You have since said you regret that vote. But why should voters trust your judgment when it comes to making a decision about taking the country to war the next time?
Because once Bush abused that power, what happened was we got elected after that. I made sure the president turned to me and said, Joe, get our combat troops out of Iraq. I was responsible for getting 150,000 combat troops out of Iraq, and my son was one of them. I also think we should not have combat troops in Afghanistan. It's long overdue. It should end. And thirdly, I believe that you're not going to find anybody who has pulled together more of alliances to deal with what is the real stateless threat out there. We cannot go it alone in terms of dealing with terrorism. So I'd eliminate the act that allowed us to go into war and not the AUMF, and make sure that it could only be used for what its intent was, and that is to go after terrorists, but never do it alone. That's why we have to repair our alliances. We put together 65 countries to make sure we dealt with ISIS in Iraq and other places. That's what I would do. That's what I have done, and I know how to do it.
Senator Sanders, 30 seconds.
One of the differences that Joe and I have in our record is Joe voted for that war. I helped lead the opposition to that war, which is a total disaster. Second of all, I helped lead the effort for the first time to utilize the War Powers Act to get the United States out of the Saudi-led intervention in Yemen, which is the most horrific humanitarian disaster on earth. And thirdly, let me be very clear. I will do everything I can to prevent a war with Iran, which would be far worse than disastrous war with
Senator
Iraq.
Sanders, thank you.
All
right, guys.
Informed consent of the American people.
Good news is you get more time to talk, but I have to sneak in one more break. We will be right back with more debate.
Candidate will have a final chance to make their case to the voters. 45 seconds each. We begin with Congressman Swalwell.
We can't be a forward-looking party if we look to the past for our leadership. I'm a congressman, but also a father of a 2-year-old and an infant. When I'm not changing diapers, I'm changing Washington. Most of the time, the diapers smell better. I went to Congress at 31, and I found a Washington that doesn't work for people like you and me. It's made of the rich and the disconnected. I was the first in my family to go to college and have student loan debt. And so I have led the effort to elect the next generation of members of Congress. And we have a moment to seize. This is a can-do generation. This is the generation that will end climate chaos. This is the generation that will solve student loan debt. And this is the generation that will say enough is enough and end gun violence. This generation demands bold solutions. That's why I'm running for president.
Congressman, thank you.
Ms. Williamson, 45 seconds for your closing
I'm
statement.
sorry we haven't talked more tonight about how we're going to beat Donald Trump. I have an idea about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not going to be beaten just by insider politics talk. He's not going to be beaten just by somebody who has plans. He's going to be beaten by somebody who has an idea what this man has done. This man has reached into the psyche of the American people, and he has harnessed fear for political purposes. So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I want you to hear me, please. You have harnessed fear for political purposes, and only love can cast that out. So sir, I have a feeling you know what you're doing. I'm going to harness love for political purposes. I will meet you on that field, and sir, love will win.
Ms. Williamson, thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you. My mom and her parents came to the United States to rebuild their shattered lives. In the only country that they could. 300 years before that, my parents' family came searching religious freedom here. The ability for one generation to do better than the next is now severely at risk in the United States, especially among children living in poverty like the ones I used to work for in the Denver public schools. That's why I'm running for president. I've had 2 tough races in Colorado by bringing people together, not by making empty promises. And I believe we need to build a broad coalition of Americans to beat Donald Trump, end the corruption in Washington, and build a new era of American democracy and American opportunity. This is going to be hard to do, but it's what our parents would have expected. It's what our kids deserve. I hope you'll join me in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Governor Hickenlooper.
I'm a small business owner who brought that same scrappy spirit to make Colorado one of the most progressive states in America. We expanded reproductive health to reduce teenage abortion by 64%. We were the first state to legalize marijuana, and we transformed our justice system in the process. We passed universal background checks in a purple state. We got to near universal health care coverage. We attacked climate change with the toughest methane regulations in the country, and for the last 3 years, we've been the #1 economy in America. You don't need big government to do big things. I know that because I'm the one person up here who's actually done the big progressive things everyone else is talking about. If we turn towards socialism, we run the risk of helping to re-elect the worst president in American history.
Thank you, Governor.
Senator Gillibrand, you have the floor for 45 seconds.
Women in America are on fire. We've marched, we've organized, we've run for office, and we've won. But our rights are under attack like never before by President Trump and the Republicans who want to repeal Roe v. Wade, which is why I went to the front lines in Georgia to fight for them. As president, I will take on the fights that no one else will. I stood up to the Pentagon and repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I've stood up to the banks and voted against the bailout twice. I've stood up to Trump more than any other senator in the U.S. Senate. And I have the most comprehensive approach for getting money out of politics with publicly funded elections to deal with political corruption. Now is not the time to play it safe. Now is not the time to be afraid of firsts. We need a president who will take on the big challenges, even if she stands alone. Join me in fighting for this.
Senator Gillibrand, thank you.
Mr. Yang, you have 45 seconds for your closing.
First, I want to thank everyone who put me on this stage tonight. I am proof that our democracy still works. Democrats and Americans around the country have one question for their nominee, and that is who can beat Donald Trump in 2020? That is the right question. And the right candidate to beat Donald Trump will be solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected and will have a vision of a trickle-up economy that is already drawing thousands of disaffected Trump voters, conservatives, independents, and libertarians, as well as Democrats and progressives. I am that candidate. I can build a much broader coalition to beat Donald Trump. It is not left. It is not right. It is forward. And that is where I'll take the country in 2020.
Mr. Yang, thank you.
Senator Harris, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I just want to leave you with a couple of things. One, we need a nominee who has the ability to prosecute the case against 4 more years of Donald Trump, and I will do that. Second, this election is about you. This is about your hopes and your dreams and your fears and what wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's why I have what I call a 3 a.m. agenda. That is about everything from what we need to do to deliver health care to how you will be able to pay the bills by the end of the month. And when I think about what our country needs, I promise you, I will be a president who leads with a sense of dignity, with honesty, speaking the truth, and giving the American family all that they need to get through the end of the month in a way that allows them to prosper. So I hope to earn your support. Please join us at KamalaHarris.org.
Senator, thank you.
Mayor Buttigieg, 45 seconds.
Nothing about politics is theoretical for me. I've had the experience of writing a letter to my family, putting it in an envelope marked just in case, and leaving it where they would know where to find it in case I didn't come back from Afghanistan. I have the experience of being in a marriage that exists by the grace of a single vote on the U.S. Supreme Court. I have the experience of guiding a community where the per capita income was below $20,000 when I took office into a brighter future. I'm running because the decisions we make in the next 3 or 4 years are going to decide how the next 30 or 40 go. And when I get to the current age of the current president in the year 2055, I want to be able to look back on these years and say my generation delivered climate solutions, racial equality, and an end to endless war. Help me deliver that new generation to Washington before it's too late.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, 45 seconds, the floor is yours.
I suspect people all over the country who are watching this debate are saying, these are good people, they have great ideas. But how come nothing really changes? How come for the last 45 years wages have been stagnant for the middle class? How come we have the highest rate of childhood poverty? How come 45 million people still have student debt? How come 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of America? And here is the answer. Nothing will change unless we have the guts to take on Wall Street, the insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the military-industrial complex, and the fossil fuel industry. If we don't have the guts to take them on, we'll continue to have plans, we'll continue to have talk, and the rich will get richer, and everybody else will be struggling.
Thank you, Senator.
And lastly, we'll hear from Vice President Biden. Sir, you have 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. I'm ready to lead this country because I think it's important we restore the soul of this nation. This president has ripped it out. It's the only president in our history who has equated racist and white supremacist with ordinary and decent people. He's the only president who has engaged and embraced dictators and thumbed her nose at our allies. I'm secondly running for president because I think we have to restore the backbone of America, the poor and hardworking middle-class people. You can't do that without replacing them with the dignity they once had. Lastly, we got to unite the United States of America as much as anybody says we can. If we do, there's not a single thing the American people can't do. This is the United States of America. We can do anything if we're together. So God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Vice President Biden, thank you.
We want to thank our candidates. We've had 2 nights of spirited debate on a range of issues, 20 candidates in all. We want to thank all of the candidates last night.
Seriously, it takes guts to run and stick your neck out like this to you guys and to the 10 last night. Thanks for having the guts to do this.
I would also like to thank the audience for completely ignoring our suggestion not to react. We made it a lot more fun.
Also, thanks to the Democratic National Committee and the Florida Democratic Party.
And of course, thank you to everyone at the Adrienne R. Center for hosting us here and our terrific audiences. Chuck mentioned.
Over terrific.
For Savannah, Jose, Chuck, and Rachel, I'm Lester Holt. Good night, everyone, from Miami.
What a debate tonight. Good evening. I'm Morgan Radford, and welcome back to our special coverage of the second night of the first Democratic debates of the 2020 election cycle right here on NBC News Now. There you have it. 2 nights, 20 candidates. The candidates are walking off the stage as we speak. Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg were in the front. They were the front runners coming into tonight. But there were also a number of people on stage who wanted to make a name for themselves, and they did come out swinging. They talked about race, immigration, police violence, healthcare, climate change, gun control, just to name a few. And those candidates tried to stake their claim on the issues. Many of them also tried to introduce themselves to some Americans who were meeting them tonight for the first time. Here are some of the highlights.
We think it is time for change, real change.
I was 6 years old when a presidential candidate came to the California Democratic Convention and said, it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans. That candidate was then Senator Joe Biden. Joe Biden was right when he said it was time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans 32 years ago. He's still right today.
Hey guys, you know what? America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table.
Yes. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a health care system in the United States. We have a sickness care system in the United States.
And I will ensure that this microphone that the President of the United States holds in her hand is used in a way that is about reflecting the values of our country.
For a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say that it is okay to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents, that God would condone putting children in cages, has lost all claim to ever use religious language again.
If you forcibly take a child from their parents' arms, you are kidnapping them.
With sophisticated 21st century border security, not a medieval wall. And the president has turned the border of the United States into a symbol of nativist hostility that the whole world is looking at, when what we should be represented by is the Statue of Liberty, which has brought my parents to this country to begin with. We need to make a change.
I am determined to bring about a day when a white person driving a vehicle and a black person driving a vehicle, when they see a police officer approaching, feels the exact same thing.
We're going to get to you. Hang on. We're going to get to you.
Stage, I would like to speak on the issue of race. And I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden. I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country.
It's a mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist.
Do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No.
Do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well,
I
there
did
was
not
a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
Who do you want, when that door closes, to be sitting behind that desk to fight for women's rights? I have been the fiercest advocate for women's reproductive freedom for over a decade.
I would pass a $1,000 freedom dividend for every American adult starting at age 18, which would speed us up on climate change, because if you get the boot off of people's throats, they'll focus on climate change much more clearly.
Governor, we must be a country who loves our children more than we love our guns.
If more guns made us safer, we'd be the safest country on earth. It doesn't work that way.
Here to help me dive into all of those issues we heard tonight on the debate stage, we've got Nancy Santiago, Vice President of Hispanics and Philanthropy, Politico's Alex Thompson, MSNBC political analyst Zerlina Maxwell. Who do you think won the debate tonight, Alex?
Oh, it was Kamala Harris. And that exchange that she had with Vice President Biden is going to be the moment that's remembered in this debate. It's also one of the most substantive disagreements, debates on race and civil rights that we've ever seen in a presidential debate. And it's not even over, because Kamala's campaign is already saying Biden needs to apologize for his past positions on busing. And there's an open question. Biden in there defended his past views that the Department of Education should not go in and enforce busing. That's not clear. That's palatable for this modern day Democratic Party. And they're going to keep pushing him to apologize and change his position.
Do you think he was right, Zerlina, to double down when she held his feet to the fire?
No, he was absolutely wrong. He's wrong. And she articulated fundamentally, I think, a really important debate in the Democratic Party, which is the role of the federal government when it steps in. When states are not doing what the Supreme Court says it should do, right? The federal government is the only entity big enough and strong enough to come in and say, no, you're going to admit these schools and integrate schools. And so her point on the substance is correct. So he was absolutely wrong in that moment and wrong to double down.
And Nancy, you were there last night in Miami, correct?
That's right.
One thing I could not help but notice was the way that identity politics was treated tonight versus last night. To me, and tell me if I'm wrong, it felt like last night was more about who I am, and tonight was more about what I've experienced. You saw the candidates connect on things like healthcare, saying, look, I've had a sick dad or I've had a terminal illness, and it seemed to be about the marrow of their experiences. Do you think that affected why that moment with Kamala was so powerful?
Well, I don't think it was that per se for me, having been in the audience, because there was some identity politics last night, and it was really around the immigration piece. It's not black and white, right? This is a very different thing. So in that respect, there was some, and that was a little heated exchange between Beto and Julian Castro, right? And so if you think about that piece, it just played out differently. What I think the problem or the missed opportunity for Biden was that he had a chance to model for America how to say, I'm sorry, let's fix this. Because she said, I was hurt personally. That was his moment to show America how you do come together, to show America how you bridge that. Because he said it, I'm the bridge. Well, then do that. And that didn't happen in the exchange with Kamala.
I think she spoke for other black people, too, because I think saying that it was hurtful, it's not saying that, like, we need to have a march in Washington to protest Joe Biden, right? I mean, that we're just saying that, you know, your words had an impact in a negative way because it seemed like you didn't understand what you were saying in the moment. You were complimenting, not praising specifically, to be clear, but saying something complimentary about segregationists seems like something you should not say as a Democrat who wants to win the nomination.
And speaking of that, what I think was so powerful was when she said, hey, I do not think you're a racist. Because for any of us who are out in the field, we hear that word being thrown around, being used just because you voted for Trump, automatically you're a racist, automatically this. And to say very plainly, hey, I believe I know what's in your heart, but this is an issue about policy, and that's why we're all standing here on the debate stage. Do you think, however, that she's keeping this issue around, as you mentioned, she said the word praising the segregationists, which he didn't, he said he didn't do,
to be clear,
and he said he didn't do that. Do you think she, and even Senator Booker, are keeping this issue alive for political reasons?
Sure. I mean, yes.
Alex was like, okay.
It's a debate. They both want to be president. Only one of them can be president. She's going to prosecute that case. That doesn't mean that the feelings aren't sincere. And that she wasn't offended and that she wasn't hurt. But she's going to keep pushing this because she wants to show that she can not only prosecute the case against Trump, she's going to prosecute the case against the frontrunner right now and prove that she can take him down. I think that's what tonight was about for her.
Speaking about looking like somebody who wanted to win the election, she didn't come in tonight just to, go up in the polls a little bit. She came out tonight with the conviction. I mean, it was almost like in the eyes. She had conviction. She looked directly into the camera at the American people and said things, with such confidence. When I'm president, when I'm in the
she will hold the mic in her hand.
Right. I mean, it's subtle, but I don't know if you feel this way as well, but Carol Moseley Braun in 2004 obviously participated in the debate.
First African
American woman.
Female senator.
I didn't watch
that was
debate.
The 90s.
Right, and I didn't watch the debate. This is the first time in my adult life I've seen a black woman on
But let's
a stage
just make sure we pause for our audience here.
Yes.
So Senator Harris is the first African-American female senator. But back in the day, in the 90s, this is who was at the debate stage from Illinois.
There are 3 black women total that have ever run. But this is the first time in my adult life I've seen a black woman on stage at this level. And to see them show up and not just be happy to be there and be participating, that they're taking it to the front runner, not just the front runner, but the former vice president, to the first black president. I think that she's going to win over a lot of fans who, again, going back to the AP poll I cited at the beginning, she's the #1 on the list of people who want to learn more about her.
So, Nancy, I have to get you to weigh in on this for me. Why was that moment with Kamala tonight read so differently than that moment with Beto yesterday, cuando estaba hablando español, when he was speaking Spanish?
It's one of those moments we've been using the word appropriation quite a bit. It was that moment of, come on, not here. Let's not do this right now.
But this is broadcast on Telemundo, para que la gente sepa, so that everyone knows que había gente Latino, there were Latino people in the audience. So he was speaking Spanish also to a Latino audience.
But it was one of those moments what we saw happen in Julian, and mind you, Julian had nothing to lose last night. It was wonderful, he had everything to gain. That fire in the belly came out. And I think Beto really dragged it out of him with that moment, because he's like, let's not go there, because we're going to talk about this, not with some cute Spanish, but what it really is. And here are the policies that you're not answering to, that you're not talking about how you're going to change. And again, no one tonight mentioned 1325. Right. Everything
Only
that's
Julian did yesterday.
That's right. And nothing happened today. And what we're still
And we're in
looking at
1325 for our audience, asylum, just so they understand
well,
what
it's 1325 is what makes it illegal to get across a border without a document, right? That's what makes it illegal. It could be a civil offense. It doesn't have to be a criminal one. Right. But this is the struggle. So that right there is what's causing it. And make no mistake about it, nobody brought up the raids that are pending. The city of Philadelphia, my hometown, it's about to be one of the largest staging sites for what we will see again as family deportations, and they're coming. No one brought it up. So I think what happened is, speaking Spanish is nice. Doing something matters. And that's what I think really got in his craw last night. And that's what we saw come out. There was a fire in the belly that I have never seen, that I was incredibly excited to see last night. And then when you see everybody kind of Googling him, like, where did he come from? I think we're going to have the same reaction to Senator Harris tonight, although many more people know who she is. But there was a different senator that was on that stage tonight.
Well, we did just find out that in terms of Google searches, the Google search for Kamala Harris increased by 500% tonight since the debate began, and she was the top search among all of the candidates. But one candidate we did not speak about, interestingly, in this post-debate show, but we were speaking about in the pre-debate show, was Senator Sanders. Yeah. So what happened? Did he hurt or did he help his lead tonight?
Well, he clearly came in not wanting to engage Biden. There was all this speculation that he was going to take on Biden, and even on one of the signature issues, really a layup for Bernie about the Iraq war vote in 2003, where Bernie was in the Congress and voted the opposite way. He mentioned it, showed that they disagreed, and then moved on to other issues. He clearly didn't want to get in a jousting match with Biden.
Was he scared?
We should ask him. I think it was a strategic calculation, though. I think he came in there ready to back down and to stick to his issues, talk about Medicare for all, and not try to get in a slugging match with Biden.
Alex, speaking of asking the candidates, I want to do just that right now with NBC's very own Vaughn Hilliard. He is there in Miami in the spin room. Vaughn, who have you been able to talk to tonight? Oh, I see the cameras moving.
Senator, going to pull.
There he is. He's pulling over Senator Bennett. Okay, Vaughn.
Two senators to your left there, to your right there on the stage. Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Kamala Harris, and they raised their hands when they talked about eliminating private health insurance. From your experience in the Senate and from working on such legislation, what is it that they're missing in this equation here?
Well, I think what they're missing, first of all, they were honest about what's in the bill, which is good, because there are some people who say that it doesn't eliminate private insurance, that it's somehow like Australia's system, which I think is a good system where you have both private and public insurance. So that's point one, credit for honesty. Second, I think what they're missing is that there are a lot of people in America, as Bernie said tonight, there are a lot of people that hate private insurance, and that's true. I hear from a lot of people like that. There are also a lot of people that like the insurance that they have and want to keep it. And I think if the objective is getting to universal health care coverage as quickly as we can, giving people an option to choose for their family, I think is absolutely going to be the fastest way. I think we will be dead before we take it away from people that are holding it at their homes or with their families, and that's why I just don't think it'll work.
The question, there was a surprise when Senator Harris raised her hand to that response there, and I think there was a concern among a lot of people that what impact does that have in a general election?
Well, first of all, I wasn't surprised because I think she's for it, and she has said that she wants it. I think that in states like Colorado and other states where that we need to win the majority in the Senate, we're going to have a hard time if the position of the Democratic Party is we're going to take insurance away from 180 million people. Remember what happened after the Affordable Care Act. President Obama said if you like your insurance, you can keep it. A relatively small number of people lost it because of the way the system came into place. And that was a political disaster, and it continues to be one today. So imagine a situation where what we're saying to people is, if you like your insurance, we're going to take it away from you. That doesn't seem to be what we should be arguing. What we should be arguing is for universal health care coverage. And we can achieve that through a public option, and I think we can achieve it quickly and with much less disruption. And by the way, everybody who has private insurance and who hates it no longer needs it, because they can come on to Medicare X.
One last question for you. There was the conversation about passing the torch to a next generation. Do you believe that two men in the middle of that stage should pass that torch?
I think it's time. I mean, I'd answer Bernie's question that he asked at the very end by saying, look, yeah, it's true. 40 years of economic immobility in this country, and we haven't figured out how to address it. I think it's time for a new generation of leadership in the country. I agree with that.
Senator Michael Bennet.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Vaughn, does Senator Bennet, does he consider himself part of this new generation of leadership? Vaughn, okay, I think Vaughn, we lost him to the spin room, which is where he ought to be, getting more answers from those candidates. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for watching. Stay tuned, because we're just going to take a very short break. We'll be right here with special coverage of the first presidential debate on NBC News Now. Stay tuned. Thanks so much for joining us here on NBC News Now. And one of the big issues that the candidates hit early was their plans for health care. We also heard a lot about that from candidate Stilwell, who is now talking to NBC's Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn Hilliard, let us know what Stilwell said. Let's go ahead and talk to him. He's there right behind you. I want to specifically ask about the question he placed to Joe Biden about torchbearers. Can we ask about that?
Yeah, Congressman Swalwell, Morgan, the question right off the top was essentially the idea of passing the torch. Why come right off the top with that as being the question to Vice President Biden?
There's an urgency to the issues that this generation faces. Student loan debt. I have it, 40 million others have it. It's persisted for the last 40 years. We need someone who's going to do something now. Gun violence. Send my kids to school and worry about their safety. So many millions of Americans do as well. We can't wait for anyone else to evolve on this issue. We need someone who understands the immediacy to act. And third, on climate, we can't have a middle-of-the-road strategy on this. The urgency to act means that we have to invest immediately in a Green New Deal type of plan. And so, Joe Biden was right 32 years ago when he said it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of leaders. I'm standing on that stage as someone who's ready to receive that torch.
Could you not make the argument that Vice President Biden or Bernie Sanders have had that experience and have had that history, though, that lends them credibility at this moment in time to make the case as to what policies to press forward?
Deep respect for Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. I just happen to think that these issues are so urgent that we can't count on people who've been around for dozens of decades as these problems have still persisted. We need new eyes on this problem set, new energy to solve them, and I'm ready to do that.
So the question is, there was 20 people on this debate stage. You're not the only one in your generation, if I may. Why you among the generation that includes Senator Kamala Harris and Mayor Pete Buttigieg?
Well, I'd say I'm day one ready. I've been in Congress for 7 years, and I've shaped Washington more than it's shaped me. I've led a group effort to bring more young members to Congress. We have over 50 members in their 40s and under, so I see a moment to seize. But I'm also on the House Intelligence Committee, one of only 3 people in the House that has the deepest access to the Mueller report. I know the threat this president is to our country. I'll be ready to lead on day one.
I'm going to pass along a question to you from Morgan. Morgan,
Vaughn, I want to ask a question for Mr. Stilwell there. One of the audience members on Twitter said that the torchbearers have not earned the trust of the people yet. Why does he think that the younger generation and the American electorate should trust him as that torchbearer?
There are some folks that have suggested that this younger generation has not earned the trust yet in order to have that torch be passed, especially when they are in the roles that they are and still have much credibility to their names. In what way have you earned that trust? Why should people actually trust you?
I went to Congress at 31 years old, and I saw a lot of millionaires, a lot of people disconnected, and so I went right to work. No freshman Democrat passed more legislation in the minority than I did my freshman year. I'm on the House Intelligence Committee. I've gone to the war zones. I've met with foreign leaders. I've taken classified briefings. Only Senator Harris and I on that stage have access to the most amount of classified information today. So I'm ready day one to lead this country.
So then why not Senator Harris?
Well, I'm a big fan of Senator Harris. I think we bring different experiences. For me, I bring working class background, born in Iowa, educated in the South, married to a Hoosier, elected in a diverse part of California. I know this country, and I can represent it and beat Donald Trump.
Congressman Swalwell, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Yep.
Morgan?
Congressman Swalwell, thank you so much. And Von Hilliard, thank you. Please stay in the spin room. We'd love to come back to you a little bit later. Again, that was NBC's Von Hilliard. And as you just heard from Congressman Swalwell, one of the big issues that the candidates hit early was their plans for health care. From Obamacare to Medicare for All, covering undocumented immigrants and doing away with private health plans. Everything was on the table tonight, and the candidates got right into it. Take a look.
Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? Yeah. All right.
When my wife and daughter were killed in an automobile accident, my 2 boys were really very badly injured. I couldn't imagine what it'd be like had I not had adequate health care available immediately. And then when my son came home from Iraq after a year, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he was given months to live. I can't fathom what would have happened if, in fact, they said, by the way, the last 6 months of your life, you're on your own. We're cutting off. You've used up your time. The fact of the matter is that the quickest, fastest way to do it is build on Obamacare.
We will have Medicare for all when tens of millions of people are prepared to stand up and tell the insurance companies and the drug companies that their day is gone, that health care is a human right, not something to make huge profits off.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Williams.
This one's very personal for me. I started out this year dealing with the terminal illness of my father. But the thing we had going for us was that we never had to make those decisions based on whether it was going to bankrupt our family because of Medicare. And I want every family to have that same freedom to do what is medically right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a health care system in the United States. We have a sickness care system in the United States.
Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
You cannot let people who are sick, no matter where they come from, no matter what their status, go uncovered. You can't do that. It's just going to be taken care of, period. You have to. It's a humane thing to do. But here's the deal. They, in fact, contribute to the well-being of the country, but they also, for example, they've increased the lifespan of Social Security because they have a job, they're paying a Social Security tax. That's what they're doing. It's increased the lifespan. They would do the same thing in terms of reducing the overall cost of health care by them being able to be treated and not wait till they're in extremis.
When we beat President Trump, and Mitch McConnell walks into the Oval Office, God forbid, to do negotiations, who do you want, when that door closes, to be sitting behind that desk to fight for women's rights? I have been the fiercest advocate for women's reproductive freedom for over a decade. And I promise you, as president, when that door closes, I will guarantee women's reproductive freedom no matter what.
Thank you.
As you just saw, the gloves were off tonight. But how many of those claims were true? NBC's Jane Tim is in Miami right now, where she's been fact-checking the candidates. Jane, what caught your eye tonight?
Hey, Morgan. Tonight was definitely a much dicier night than last night. A lot of different facts flying, some of them right, some of them not right. One of the first things that jumped out at me was Senator Kamala Harris saying Democrats, the economy isn't working for some people because people are working multiple jobs. This is something we hear a lot from the left because the economy looks pretty good and it's one of Trump's biggest claims for re-election. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks how many people actually work multiple jobs. It's about 5% of America. That's 8 million people, so quite a lot of people. You can say there's a lot of people doing it, but it's actually down slightly from the last 20 years ago. A couple other things that jumped out at me. Mayor Pete Buttigieg talking about the pathway to citizenship, the fact that the vast majority of Americans actually support some kind of pathway to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. This is true. We have a Gallup poll that says 81% of Americans feel this way. A couple other things. A lot of people say Medicare for all doesn't abolish all private insurance. It does for everything but cosmetic care, which is not what most people think about for insurance purposes. The big one, of course, is Biden and busing. So Kamala Harris went straight after Biden for his opposition of busing years ago and how his policies and how he worked with segregationists. And this is true. She's careful in what she says, but Biden absolutely worked with avowed segregationists in order to oppose busing. His constituents opposed it, and he opposed it. And it's one of the things that's really hitting him hard right now as he tries to say he can take the banner for his party in the 2020 election. But people in his party say that maybe he is not where the mainstream of the party is now.
Which is interesting, Jane, because that's the moment that for every one of our panelists here, that really caught their eye. This question on busing and the fact that Senator Harris did hold his feet to the fire. So we definitely appreciate you clearing that up for us. Jane, Tim, thanks for being with us live from Miami. Right now, we're going to take a very quick break, but we hope that you stay with us for special coverage of the first presidential Democratic debate right here on NBC News Now. Welcome back to NBC News Now. Let's go straight to our very own Dasha Burns, who's watching the debate tonight with a few college students from all across the country. Dasha, what stood out to the students tonight? Who do they think really captured their attention?
Oh, man, it was a lively room in here tonight. A lot of hot takes, and I'm going to ask for them now. Guys, you had a lot to say while we were watching, and I want those top-line reactions right now. What stood out about the candidates, and what was your take on the debate overall tonight, especially compared with last night?
Well, I think Vice President Biden and Senator Sanders both buckled under the pressure of being frontrunners. You know, it seemed like when the heat really got turned up on them, they couldn't hold their own. And I think that's pretty big of, are they going to be able to last in this field? And, for somebody like Vice President Biden, if, Kamala Harris was pretty tough on him tonight, the president's going to be tough on him in a general election. Is he going to be able to handle that?
Speaking of Kamala Harris, I felt that even though tonight a lot of the candidates were able to come at Joe Biden for his controversial past, I think that Kamala was able to benefit from people not checking up on her particular past as she talked about her role in regards to prison reform and immigration. I feel like other candidates should have held her feet to the fire, just as they held Joe Biden to that standard as well. So that should be interesting to see what's going to happen in the future. However, I do feel that she was able to make very strong quotes that are going to be headliners. And from that, people are going to be under the impression that she, quote unquote, won this debate. I, however, don't think so.
Right, so you don't think people checked her enough, but the fact that didn't happen, that she was able to hold Joe Biden's feet to the fire and no one came back at her. I mean, what does that say about her performance?
Definitely very worrisome in that regard. And especially, I'm going to keep going back to her statements about prison reform. She has a very controversial past about that. And the fact that nobody was able to bring that up and she was able to kind of paint the narrative of an individual that has always been fighting for these rights is somewhat problematic to me.
But did she resonate with you guys tonight?
I definitely was really impressed by what she had to say tonight, and I feel like her current positions and the current things that she was saying really resonated with me. But I definitely feel like what she really brought out of Joe Biden was like a lot of disappointment that I felt hearing about the fact that he kind of doubled down on that past position, and she was really able to make it seem or at least to kind of bring out the nasty racial tensions there, and the fact that he still kind of holds some of those old views today. So,
yeah, I mean, you guys, when I asked you about Joe Biden before the debate, I asked who was excited. Nobody raised their hands. What did his performance tonight do to change your opinion of him?
He was a distraction, I feel like, the entire debate, because a lot of the candidates were just using their time to attack him and goad him, and then he spent all of his time basically defending himself, saying, oh, this is what I did, this is what I did. And he very rarely talked about what he actually planned to do. There wasn't a lot of substance with that. That's why I was more interested in some of the candidates like Pete Buttigieg and Andrew Yang, because they were just more focused on what they were actually planning to do. And even though they didn't get as many opportunities to speak as some of the headliners, they actually used their time to explain what they plan to do.
Right. I mean, we talked about how you guys are interested in hearing substance. You're interested in hearing about policy. You talked about wanting a more civil discourse, trying to elevate the rhetoric. How did the candidates do with that tonight? And compare that to last night as well.
I feel that was the most disappointing thing about tonight, that we did get to see some of their personalities, but we didn't really get to see their policies and how they distinguish each of themselves through their policy. That's what we didn't get to see, and that was the most disappointing, that I really don't know what their plan is going to be and how they set themselves apart from each other.
And I think it's very clear what the candidates are against at this point, and that's what we commonly heard. They're against Trump, they're against Wall Street. But what I liked about Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg in particular is they were very distinctly for something. Kamala Harris, for example, laid out that plan to give a credit to people making below $100,000 a year. That was really impressive. It kind of made her stand out as an advocate for the working and middle class. And that's more of what I want to see in these future Democratic debates.
Did you guys get any clarity from tonight, and even from both nights, in terms of who you think will get your support and be able to last in this race?
I think it's funny how tonight was supposed to be the night where individuals were supposed to be more excited, considering the big name candidates that were gathered together. But unfortunately, I personally believe that yesterday's debate was a lot more based on actual policies that the candidates want to be able to focus on, especially the conversations that we were all having before, and especially what you said. Unfortunately, tonight, it was just all about Trump, 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 Trump. And again, it's like, yes, we already know what Trump is. We already know what Trump stands for. We get it. What are you going to do as an individual to help us? We are a younger generation that's not going to do what our parents did and just accept what you say to us. We want to make sure that when you get into office, you are going to stand by what you mean.
All right, so night one actually seems like it won with you guys. that took the cake. So who won from both nights? Let's start with you.
No one. Well, tonight, no one won, but yesterday it was Julian Castro.
I think Julian won for both nights because he was actually to show his personality and also his policy.
I think Castro from last night, definitely, but Kamala Harris for tonight. But I would say overall, probably Castro would prevail.
I think Secretary Castro stands out for both nights.
Lex?
I thought Castro did stand out during the last debate. I also thought Elizabeth Warren did a pretty good job.
Pick one between both nights.
I liked Castro more just because I really wasn't expecting anything out of him, I guess you could say, and he stood out. During this debate, again, I thought Pete Buttigieg did a great job, and I also thought in his limited time speaking, Andrew Yang did a good job.
I actually think Kamala Harris won both nights of the debate. I think she showed herself to be able to battle another politician for clearly immoral policies in the past. I liked how she stood for something very clearly. And I also liked that she was a very strong speaker. She asserted herself. And that's something I want to see in a presidential candidate, especially when they take on Trump.
Wow. Okay, so still a pretty heavy vote for Castro, but Kamala definitely got the spotlight tonight. There you have it.
Dasha.
First debate's done, and we'll see how the rest go.
Thank you so much, and thank you again to your panel of students. Something that Joy said really struck me. I want to bring in our guest again. Joy was the young woman in the front who said that Kamala didn't actually win because Kamala didn't get a dose of her own medicine. She turned and she questioned former Vice President Biden, but no one actually did that to her, especially when it came to her record on her prosecution record in criminal justice. Is that true or false? Did she not win because she didn't have to take the heat herself?
That might be true. I'm not very well versed in her prison reform issues. However, I really thought that she stole the show. I mean, I thought she came off very assertive, very confident. She answered every question with, she was very direct and straightforward. I mean, I really did think that she came out on top. I walked away, I know personally, really having a better idea of where she stood on issues.
What about Jackie, her criminal justice record?
Yeah, I mean, she's received a lot of scrutiny for not being progressive enough. She was able to, I think, exploit a few opportunities in order to tout her record as Attorney General. For example, when she called out Biden on the Obama administration's track record with in introducing family separation, which she said was the one policy of her former president that she was not in favor of. But that's the benefit of preparation. I mean, when you're on the offensive, you don't have to answer for the things that people aren't attacking you for. And it was clear that this was something attacking Biden on his opposition to busing was something that they had teed up. She went for it, and she did not let up on Biden. And that was a really big moment. That was the defining moment of the week. That's been the defining moment, I think, of this election so far.
And she made it very personal.
She did. And what about Buttigieg, Nancy? Because, you know, when he was asked about why the police force back in South Bend was not very diverse, he said very plainly, I couldn't get it done. Was that refreshingly honest, or was that enough?
It was honest, but it was definitely not enough. You fell short. I mean, you gave me all of the reasons why. I'm sure you've given all your constituents as to why it didn't get done. What you didn't give me is what will you do differently, right? You're going to have to break this open. You can't walk in to this next stage of our presidency without being able to answer that question in a very concrete way. So you didn't get it done. Understood. There are a lot of things folks didn't get done. What's your plan to do it differently? I didn't hear that at all.
Jackie, what did you think when Congressman Swalwell looked at him and said, well, then fire your police chief? And he didn't say anything.
Right, and I think that was really indicative of Mayor Pete's approach, I think, to politics in general, right? Let's see the process play out. We're conducting an investigation. I'm not going to come to any rash decisions. But I'm not necessarily sure that that's an answer that the public wants to see right now, especially in an era of our politics where things are pretty, aren't necessarily rules-based, at least in Trump's world. And I think if you're comparing him to someone like Julian Castro, who yesterday really, got at his criminal justice reform and his policing reform and was able to tout all of those policies. Mayor Pete wasn't able to show the same. And so to me, the accountability is a step forward. It's a big contrast to someone like Biden. But then when you tee him up next to someone like Julian, who has a lot of experience as being mayor as well.
And a lot of specifics.
Exactly. Yeah. It's that's something when they're sitting next to each other at the next debate, it's going to show.
But one thing that we did hear some specifics on, he had Mayor Pete, very strong words about China. He said, China is using technology for the perfection of dictatorship. But did he really lay out a democratic alternative to dealing with China?
No, not really. I mean, you heard others mention the idea of rallying together with other foreign nations to push back against China, to confront their behavior. Certainly, you heard the mention of intellectual property, which is, the real issue that they can rally all around pretty easily, especially globally. But no, not specifics. I mean, I think with all of any foreign policy mentioned tonight, I didn't really hear much specifics in general.
And what about when he talked about, Nancy, the pathway to citizenship? He said there's 11 million people waiting for a pathway to citizenship, but he said that the White House has divided us on a common ground issue. True or false?
Well, I think the polls show that it's a common issue with a common kind of big end goal. We disagree in the details. We've been divided on this issue for a very long time, though. And so I think that one of the things that came up was the Obama record. Now, they called him the deportation chief, right? The deporter in chief. It wasn't family separation, it was deportations. So there's a little bit of a difference there in that what we're seeing now is so violently aggressive of children being taken from families and children dying. Very different. Yeah, I think people are very upset about something that they kind of in the big picture all agree on. But I think what's not being called out in all of these things, from the criminal justice reform to the busing situation to immigration, is that the big issue on the table is still around racial equity in this country. And nobody's calling it out. Nobody wants to talk about it for what it is. It's the issue of racial equity. And until we get comfortable about talking about it, we're going to continue going around in circles, and it's going to surface in different ways and in different policy issues. But the uncomfort we saw for both Biden not knowing how to respond to that was hurtful conversation, to Buttigieg not being able to talk about, I didn't get it done, the kind of almost pulling back and not wanting to come back out at this.
A reticence to talk about it.
Exactly.
But did we see a reticence to talk about it? Because we saw someone, even like Marianne Williamson, came out very frankly and said, look, I don't think that America's actually racist, but I do think they are woefully undereducated on the issue of race. And even the fact that Kamala said, no, wait a minute. I'm going to finish answering that question because, oh, by the way, I'm the only person of color standing on this stage. Do you think they were more aggressive in addressing this issue tonight?
Yeah, well, I mean, Marianne Williamson went out of her way to bring up the issue of reparations, which has been a hot topic that was introduced by Kamala on the Breakfast Club 1051 interview at the beginning of the primary. And she said that it would be a way to address the systemic inequality that exists in America right now. And I think what was so effective about Kamala talking about it was her saying, having so many personal anecdotes, you know, that vision and that tweet of her as a young girl being the victim of busing and saying that she doesn't know anyone personally in her life, any African-American male who hasn't been the target of racial discrimination or police profiling. That to me was something that just really, really resonated.
Which is interesting because on the same issue of reparations, you mentioned the Breakfast Club, every single candidate that's come on their show has been asked about this issue, but even what the host of that show will say is that they've not heard any specifics. You say you support this in theory, but what does that actually look like? Is that addressing issues that affect the Black community, or is it an actual check? More questions for us to discuss as soon as we have to go to this break. Stay with us right here on NBC News Now. Last night, Democratic candidates held back just a little bit more when they were referencing President Trump. But tonight was a very different story.
Let me tell you something. I hear that question, but where was that question when the Republicans and Donald Trump passed a tax bill that benefits the top 1%?
The American people understand that Trump is a phony, that Trump is a pathological liar and a racist, and that he lied to the American people during his campaign. He said he was going to stand up for working families. Well, President Trump, you're not standing up for working families when you try to throw 32 million people off the health care that they have, and that 83% of your tax benefits go to the top 1%. That's how we beat Trump. We expose him for the fraud that he is.
What does Donald Trump do? He says, go back to where you came from. That is not reflective of our America and our values, and it's got to end.
What President Trump has done is not only attack these children, not only demonize these immigrants, he is attacking a basic principle of America's moral core. We open our hearts to the stranger.
But the worst thing President Trump has done is he's diverted the funds away from cross-border terrorism, cross-border human trafficking, drug trafficking, and gun trafficking, and he's given that money to the for-profit prisons.
President Obama, I think, did a heck of a job. To compare him to what this guy's doing is absolutely, I find, close to immoral.
This president, though, for immigrants, there's nothing he will not do to separate a family, cage a child, or erase their existence.
Well, one of the worst things about President Trump that he's done to this country is he's torn apart the moral fabric of who we are. When he started separating children at the border from their parents, the fact that 7 children have died in his custody, the fact that dozens of children have been separated from their parents and they have no plan to reunite them.
On day one, we take out our executive order pen and we rescind every damn thing on this issue that Trump has done.
Absolutely. What is the greatest national security threat to the United States? It's Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I agree, climate change represents an existential threat. He denies the science. You want to talk about North Korea, real threat in terms of nuclear arsenal, but what does he do? He embraces Kim Jong-un, a dictator for the sake of a photo op.
So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I want you to hear me, please. You have harnessed fear for political purposes, and only love can cast that out. So sir, I have a feeling you know what you're doing. I'm going to harness love for political purposes. I will meet you on that field, and sir, love will win.
So for some final thoughts, let's get right back to our panel. Michael, Alex, and Lena are here for more. Was it strategic and was it smart to make Trump more of the focus tonight?
Well, Trump certainly enjoyed it. He was live tweeting this time. He didn't say it was boring this time. And you saw him really go after the Democrats for their positions on providing health care to undocumented immigrants and crossing the border.
What did you think, Zerlina?
I mean, I think that they needed to talk about Trump tonight. I think that was missing from last night. And you need to talk about Donald Trump because nothing about this moment is normal. I think it's good to show that the Democrats can be the post-Trump leaders of the future, but we need to talk about the existential threat that Donald Trump poses to the country.
What did you think, Michael? Did you feel like this tonight just gave Donald Trump more fodder because of the division?
I mean, look, I think when you think about this thing, if I'm a Democrat, I'm concerned about a couple of things here. Who can beat Donald Trump in the states where it matters? So if you look at Pennsylvania, Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 44,000 votes. He beat Hillary Clinton in Michigan by 10,000 votes. He beat Hillary Clinton in Wisconsin by 22,000 votes, and in Florida by 100,000 votes. Those are not drastically wide margins that are unbeatable. So my question is, if I'm going to make this case that if I am a Democrat that I can beat this guy, how can I make up those margins? That has to be the fundamental question when you're thinking about electoral politics.
But it wasn't just about focusing on Donald Trump, because it was also about focusing on each other. And then we saw kind of a similar tactic tonight that we saw last night, where these guys who were polling in the single digits on the ends of the stage were coming for the guys who were standing in the center of the stage. We saw Swalwell go for Biden, Bennett go for Bernie. Did that work?
I think so. I mean, otherwise, were you going to remember who is at the end of the stage? I mean, I'm not even making that as a joke. I think there are a lot of candidates on stage, and sometimes it's hard to keep track with where each one stands on the issues. But I think, in order to stand out on a stage of 10 people, you have to go after the guy who's in charge. I mean, you're running for president. You're not running, just to be there.
There's one office.
Yeah, one office. And I think, going back to the thing I said earlier about Kamala Harris, I mean, I think it's important to show up and act like you're there to be president. You're not running to be vice president. You're not running just to up your name recognition. You're actually running to do the job. And I think that going after Biden directly shows that you're willing to take on somebody who has been a vice president.
But was it effective, Alex?
Well, so I don't think anyone stood out as much as Secretary Castro did last night. I think you saw Michael Bennett, you saw John Hickenlooper, you saw Eric Swalwell go after Mayor Pete briefly.
Not even Senator Harris tonight. Not as much as Julian Castro.
Oh, no, Secretary Harris, but I consider her in a different tier than Secretary Castro. I was talking about sort of the lesser tier going after the big candidates. Kamala clearly is in a league of her own with this debate. But no, Michael Bennett, all these lower tier candidates, I don't think they really did anything to help their candidacies to qualify for the third and fourth round of debates.
But the truth is, a lot of people who are watching these debates are tuned in and they're curious. Was there anything that you heard tonight that would really jazz up those people who stayed home back in 2016?
I'm going to be honest, not yet, but it's early, right? I mean, there are so many debates to come. Candidates have to continue to build out those operational infrastructures. I don't think we pay a lot of attention to this. Debate performances are great, but are you actually laying that foundation, which is how you target, how you mobilize a constituency that propels you on to a victory? And it's too early to sort of predict this yet.
Yeah, they're very focused on the progressive voters, and the question is, by taking these progressive stances, will it make it harder to appeal to those voters in the general?
And the question is, though, will it work? We're going to have a hard break here in just a moment. I want to thank each of you for coming in tonight, and even those who aren't sitting on the couch right now, Alex, Jackie, Michael, Hagar, Nancy, Zerlina, Dasha, and all of those students. And of course, all of you at home, thank you so much for watching the past two nights of the first presidential Democratic debates. Thanks for tuning in to NBC News Now. And don't miss the main event. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to replay night 2 of the first Democratic debate just coming up next. Otherwise, tune in tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern for more on NBC News Now. I'm Morgan Radford. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us.